What was a dark secret of your former well-known employer? I used to work for a company that rhymes with Muzzbead, and we used to have somebody post a variation on this very question every few months for material for one of our clickbait articles. Well, they're out of business now, but in the early 90s I worked at Radio Shack for a year and a half. When people would return an item because it didn't work, the manager of the store would just box it back up and sell it again as if it were new. When I asked him about that, he said, hopefully they'll return it to a different store. I nearly got fired when I refused to sell a guy a walkie-talkie CB radio that I knew didn't work. The guy was on his way out for a hunting trip and was buying 3 of these for him and his friends. We had 2, and I knew the third one was the broken one. In front of the customer, I told the manager that one didn't work and I'd tested it. The guy was happy I told him. We arranged for him to get the last one he needed at a different store, and off he went. The manager was livid with me and nearly fired me. I'm sorry, I'm not sending people out into the forest with gear that I know doesn't work. Hilariously, a few months later, the manager was caught stealing from the store and got fired. One time I returned a monitor to a Fry's Electronics that had a defective mount, so that it was lopsided no matter what. I literally watched the guy box it back up to normal looking, tape it up, and while he was refunding my card, I saw another one walk over and put it back on the shelf. No wonder they're out of business now. I used to work at a graphic designer firm. All of our Adobe software was pirated. From what I've heard about Adobe, if I was in that game, I'd be pirating too. Olive Garden breadsticks are just Fran's brand breadsticks, garlic salt, and margarine. If you don't hear music when you're supposedly on hold, the operator simply muted their mic and can still hear you. I've heard interesting and damning things while customers thought I couldn't hear them. I used to work surveillance at a casino. From something like a 3 stories high ceiling, we could zoom in on the table games and read the serial numbers of the bills. We could see the pips on the dice. Policy was to not look down blouses. This is true and also really annoying because I worked on the floor and the guys in surveillance can't be bothered to do their job and give us a lot of, we really can't see anything when we call them about stuff. Well, they're busy looking down blouses. I don't know if this is true, but it's certainly plausible. Both that the technology exists but that the analysts are too lazy to use it, and that people use it exclusively to be creeps. Government-funded refugee advocacy agencies at a time were approving a disproportionate amount of young women, between 18 to 25, from Syria and Iraq, with a history of the unspeakable act for their services. Upon further investigation, I and my team discovered consultants from said agency were engaging in relationships with these girls and were denying them opportunities of employment to keep them in financial destitution purposefully. When the girls became desperate, the offer of private services for compensation was made by the consultants. I whistle blew to the organization heads. They thanked me, and the consultants were gone the next day. Huge meeting with senior board, apologies and statements of, this isn't the way we do things. Many speeches, blah blah blah. And within 3 months, me and the other 6 complainants and investigators had all resigned from the company for different reasons. On paper, it looks coincidental. In reality, we were all individually pushed out. 2 of the consultants that we uncovered doing the worst stuff weren't even fired. They were given the option to resign and are currently working at other agencies with vulnerable young women. Yeah, you should at least give an anonymous tip to the FBI, because that's borderline human trafficking. Maple sap can be trucked in from other states, and where it's turned from sap to syrup decides on the state it comes from, not the location of the trees. Inbound call center. The "we are currently experiencing an unusually high call volume" message is permanent. They just didn't staff adequately. That, and sometimes we just took our sweet time. I worked as a dog groomer for a summer. We gave your dog a treat even if they weren't good. Worked in insurance. Hundreds of people have access to your social security number with no security clearance or background check. Worked at a major cable and ISP company, and there are 4 billing cycles. They upgraded the billing system, but did something wrong, and all but the current cycle got a late charge. But instead of fixing it immediately, we were told to credit their account if the customer called in. I did the math, and for the size of our city and the 3/4 of people wrongly charged, it was over $1 million US. Most people just pay their bill and don't look too close. Comcast. They do this all the time. Not really worth the hour plus it takes on the phone for them to not steal from you, but it's worth it to them to steal from thousands of people. They make so much money. If you were on live chat with customer care, I could see what you were typing before pressing send. I watched people work through grotesque, racist, misogynistic statements, fraudulent lies and mistruths, meticulous grammar fixes, and their whole range of emotions in real time before deleting and typing, "OK." Arby's manager replaced the expiration stickers on the bread with new ones. I guess so the bread would last longer that way. I threw out more than 100 pitas with green fuzz on them after checking the manager's work. Yep, Subway manager used to do similar. Prepped all of the veggies and meats, like way over-prepped, and everything went out of date. Most things last 2 days. Lettuce, after a couple of days, becomes a slimy sludge. They basically wanted me to replace all of the date marking stickers and call it a day. Not only was it horrifically bad, it was time-intensive. But I wasn't having it. I discarded all of it, bins and bins of waste, and I told the area manager. Nobody did anything, just said be quiet. Then the manager disappeared off the face of the earth, thankfully for our sakes. I worked for a restoration company. One time an elderly woman called them to clean her house. She was a hoarder, or there had been a fire, I can't remember. Anyway, the company charged $57,000 for the work to be done, but in actuality they couldn't even get the charges to add up to $20,000. She couldn't file this on her insurance. There are other examples of gross overcharging, but this is the worst I know of that wasn't on the large loss side. The lesson here is, if you have water, fire, mold, or hoarder damage and call in a company to clean it up, go through every line item on the invoice. Every single one. I worked for a large construction company, and the sales guys would intentionally omit items from contracts because they received incentives for what would then become a change order. I'd say, "You forgot to include any framing in this contract," and the sales weasel would be like, "Oh, I guess it's a change order then." Customer cries. The difference between the high-quality deli meat sold at Marks & Spencer's and the regular deli meat sold in other grocery stores is that we changed the label. We'd literally stop the production line, wait for the guy who ran the label machine to swap them out, and then start it back up again. This isn't an uncommon occurrence across any product. The concept of perceived quality fascinates me. I work in wine manufacturing, and it's incredible what people will spend on wine because the packaging makes it appear high or low quality. Marketing also plays a big role, of course. Store or generic brands don't advertise, or advertise much less, so the costs can stay low. Cheaper packaging, cheaper advertising, same product, lower price. Your luggage at an airport isn't really handled with care. Nothing is handled with care. If it's marked fragile, your only hope is nice baggage handlers. You should avoid packing breakable things at all costs. Okay, it's not totally true, I've never had one, but we were trained on how to properly handle a casket. The training was, be very careful, don't drop it, and for the love of God, don't sit on it like it's a horse. True story, that's what our boss said. And of course, there's that wonderfully human fact of life. The fact that someone included this absolute no-brainer in your training means that one or multiple people have indeed ridden the coffin like that one guy riding the bomb in Dr. Strangelove. Awesome. Hotels do not typically have security, maintenance, or housekeeping on staff 24/7. Once housekeeping finishes cleaning all of the rooms, the entire staff leaves except for one front desk employee. Yeah, the amount of times I, at the time a 19-year-old kid, was left completely alone at a mid-size and largely recognizable hotel brand was honestly kind of wild. I essentially had no clue what I was doing. People would just kind of call that something in their room was broken, and literally the best I could do was go up and just kinda troubleshoot random stuff. And then during that time, the front desk was completely unattended. This was like 9 p.m. too, not 3 a.m. The secret ingredient of Jimmy John's tuna salad is soy sauce. Kiko Man soy sauce, specifically. And yes, screw the owner for what he does to animals. I worked at Best Buy 20 years ago. Employee discount was 5% over cost, and I needed a new printer. Decided to splurge on a gold-plated USB printer cable that we sold for $40. I rang up $1.78. The stain protector is only useful if you actually file a claim. It isn't a magic frickin' potion. Most furniture companies sell some sort of stain protector as an add-on. People buy it thinking it has some magic ability to prevent stains over the life of a piece of upholstery. Then, 5 years later, they'll spill some Kool-Aid on that stuff and the stain doesn't come out. With most of those protectors, there's a warranty claim process that will get you a new sofa, or a new set if your sofa pattern isn't made anymore, but nobody ever files a claim. That's the gimmick. The company is counting on you not actually holding them to the deal that they made you. and virtually nobody does. The vehicle modification stop at Chillicothe Correctional Institution in Chillicothe, Ohio, dumps waste coolant from the machine stop into a storm drain that empties directly into the Scioto River, because the chemical disposal tank is a 55-gallon drum in the paint shop, and that's much too small. They can't throw me into solitary confinement for complaining anymore. This happens about once a year when the machine's coolant reservoirs are emptied and the coolant is replaced. It's not on a schedule, and it's one of those things that you do when work is slow. Each machine holds 15 to 20 gallons, and usually you just add more as it evaporates. But eventually it gets nasty and needs to be replaced. It's supposed to go in a waste tote to be disposed of safely, which is what every non-government machine shop does. Being able to prove that this is being done would require knowing that they're going to do this, and that's a decision that often gets made spur of the moment. Hey, work is slow, let's have a cleanup day. There aren't phones in the machine shop either. A container to store the waste properly costs $200. Why waste taxpayer money when we can just poison the taxpayers instead? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. One of our best restaurants in my town is locally famous and everybody goes there. They say everything is homemade. The thing they're famous for is the hot beef sandwiches, with homemade potatoes and gravy, and the fish fry. The fish fry they also have during the week listed as an entree called the cod platter. The homemade potatoes and gravy are instant Cisco brown gravy mix and instant Cisco mashed potatoes. The cod is only fresh and fried on Fridays. If you order it during the week, it's frozen breaded Cisco fish fillets, aka a blend of random fish shaped into a stick. In the United States, one company's bread and butter was simply reboxing and relabeling computer monitors from China to make it seem like they were from the company, and they made and assembled them in some way. I worked for a major hotel chain in housekeeping for 10 years. The number of self-deletions and people who die naturally in their hotel rooms is a lot higher than you'd think. I worked at a huge convention hotel with over 1,000 rooms, and it happened pretty often. Unless it was a really gnarly mess, it would just get cleaned up like normal, and the next guest had no idea. Ice manufacturing. My shift manager dropped a 7-gram bag of Mary J into a bag of ice. It went out for delivery. Nobody ever phoned in to complain, though. Right around the same time a major retailer had its largest warehouse burned down, it fired a huge number of its store managers under the guise that their stores were experiencing unusually high theft rates of more than $2 million after its annual shrinkage report. They fired my store manager and tried to tell me that we had a near $3 million shrinkage. I spent 12 hours with a full crew of salaried managers trying to locate the missing items within the store. I'm talking full-blown arcade machines, furniture, big-ticket items. We found nothing outside of a display the counting crew missed. The warehouse was burned down within a week or two of this. They're still filling in some of these store management spots. When I worked at a Godiva store, we'd turn expired chocolate bars into sample pieces. Somehow, this is the most benign comment in this whole group. Chuck E. Cheese isn't a real mouse. If you lived in Brandon, Florida from 2007 through 2009, it was actually me. Everyone's favorite sauce that people wanted the recipe for was mostly mayonnaise. Sure, it was called creamy pineapple sauce, but it's just pineapple salsa and mayonnaise. At my newspaper, we sometimes made up letters to the editor. All new clothing and everything you try on is dirty. I've worked in retail for years, and it still shocks people that there's no washing machine or disinfectant spray or wipes. Nothing. I've opened boxes of new clothes that had white bugs coming out of them. I've seen women after a workout class come in and try clothes on, and then just leave still sweaty from the class. One older lady left dime-size skin flakes in the clothes that she tried on. Not to mention whatever happens when they return the item or what happened in the factory. People are gross, nothing is clean, always wash your clothes when you get them home. Well, this is my least favorite one. I'll admit I was already aware of it, although it took me until my 30s to figure out I should be washing these things once I bought them, but these specific examples were a bit too gross for me. Ugh. If you pick up a wall phone at Home Depot at the time of writing in 2022 and push 7, it activates the store-wide intercom. This works in every store in my province as far as I know. Pound symbol, then 35 at Lowe's. Your warranty service part that took 8 months actually arrived 3 weeks after they paid the invoice. They didn't even order it for 7 months. They told you it was a manufacturing delay and supply chain issue, but in reality they couldn't afford to pay their bills and just had to pick and choose which orders to place. You weren't a priority. They were just really bad at budgeting and damage control. Ice machines are disgusting inside, full of slime. Inbound call center. There's no such thing as a silent hold. You are on mute. We could still hear you, but this isn't done maliciously, so we can listen in. We had targets for hold time, and putting you on mute instead of on hold on that call brought the average down. Sometimes we were asking a colleague for input, sometimes we were avoiding an awkward silence while the computer took forever to load. Personally, I did it a lot because I can fix your issue or account easier when you're not yapping in my ear with stupid questions. And also I might want to shout some very bad words at the last person you spoke to for messing it up or bullcrapping you in the first place. I worked at a candy bagging warehouse, like the crappy 99-cent gas station candy where we'd even make the trail mix by hand. Tons of sweat would drip into the mix because we'd be in a 100 Fahrenheit plus room with little ventilation. Also, my boss was a hunter, so a quarter of the warehouse was dedicated to his taxidermy treasure room. Frickin' smelt like crap in the summer, but he was so proud of himself. Also, I should add that if the expiration dates were bad, we'd use nail polish remover to take the date off. I used to work for a rural internet service provider. We had one access point with 13 customers, but only 12 IP addresses provisioned. This means only 12 out of 13 people could be online at any one time. Anytime a customer called from that service area, we'd log in and reboot the tower's radios, kicking everyone offline to force DHCP renewals. It always meant that whomever was calling in was able to get an IP and get online, but we knew that if all 13 customers wanted to be online at once, we wouldn't be able to service them. I brought it up with management, but they deemed it too expensive to address. I explained that it made us look like a fly-by-night, shady-as-heck outfit. Since it was a rural ISP, I knew I'm not just talking to one person either. I'm talking to him, his wife, dog, kids, priest, and 5 buddies from the coffee shop. Make a bad impression on one person and you might as well take out an ad in their local paper calling the whole town buttholes. I handed out a lot of free months of service working there, and would often make the point credits aren't revenue for justifiably angry customers. I used to work as a receptionist at an upscale salon. While I was there, the salon introduced a new line of products marketed towards men. Up until that point, most of our products were marketed towards women, but the execs saw that we were getting more male customers. Every item in the men's product line was about half the cost of our other products. The men's shampoo was the exact same shampoo the salon had been selling for many years, but because they put it in black packaging with the word man on it, it was half the price. The owner's explanation was, well, men don't want to pay that much for hair products. For the rest of the time I worked there, every time a woman came up to buy that shampoo, I'd tell her that the men's shampoo was the exact same product for half the price. If you go to an event that has event security, ask them for better seats, or be really nice to them. They might bring you something special. I work at a hockey rink. We give nice people pucks, pins, and let them go down to the front to see the players. I worked at L'Oreal. The cosmetics from L'Oreal and Lancome are practically the same, but Lancome costs you like $20 more. I worked at a Petco in Alaska. Apparently brown or black mice are not allowed up here. Only white mice. We got a shipment in of a bunch of black and brown mice and had to take them to the vet to be euthanized. Also, the animals are literally shipped in on a UPS truck and delivered in packages. I would open a package and it would be full of fish or mice or snakes. You never knew what was coming. It was wild. Luckily, my shift manager was a really good person. She tried her best to help any sick animal and was super diligent about keeping the cages really clean. She'd stay after hours to care for the sick animal in the back and double down on the cleaning. When upper management came, they didn't give a damn how clean anything was. They'd yell at us to get more customers to sign up for pet rewards. If I didn't pester every single person checking out, they'd get angry and give me point deductions. I have no idea what the deductions even did. One of the upper managers watched me for like 3 hours when I was at the register. He said I wasn't pushy enough on getting people to donate or sign up for stuff. Which I will ask once, and if they say no, I am not asking again. That crap is only going to drive people away. He also got mad at me when I didn't clean the birdcage fast enough. He said it took time away from the register. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't want our birds to stand there in their own doo-doo for hours, so yeah, I'm going to take my time to scrub that crap clean. Also, don't buy fish from Petco. Pretty much every shipment that came in, they were all infected with ICK. Basically, half our tanks were in quarantine. We had several customers come back saying we killed their entire fish tank because of a fish we sold to them. Screw Petco. Well, I've never heard of that company, but this seems like a good public service announcement for our listeners in Freedomland. Keep those Petco fishies out of your aquariums, and dump out your litter boxes in the cars of any of the company's upper management when you see them in the parking lot. This isn't a company secret, but I worked part-time at a Domino's franchise in college. The owner was, at first glance, a short-tempered, critical penny pincher who did everything he could to save business money, right down to watching over your shoulder to make sure you didn't put too much cheese on a pizza. Cheese is called white gold in the pizza industry, even back in 2002. But after working for him for a while, you realized why he was so specific about the margins. Twice yearly, he would send out generous bonuses, in the form of money orders made out to his employees from his own personal savings account to the college students working for him. The checks and money orders contained the memo line, "Keep learning." The amount of the money orders would be directly correlated to the profit margins of the stores he owned. The guy did legit profit sharing. After I graduated, I heard a rumor that he was trying to start up a small education grant trust that would benefit applicants of the Farmer School of Business at Miami University. But I don't think anything ever came of it. This owner also played favorites when hiring. Every single one of his managers was a former employee. 3 of the 4 managers at his stores when I worked there had graduated from my college with business degrees. All 4 of them had a small portion of their education paid for by Marvin Corvington. Marvin Corvington, Oxford, Ohio Domino's owner from Vevey, Indiana, died in 2017. That guy knew how to do business and do it right. What's your most insane meeting the parents story? He brought his mother on our first date. Dated a girl just for a bit, no plans at all to meet her parents at this point. We had just finished doing the deed for the first time when she got a call from her mum. Apparently, she'd had a little bit too much to drink and needed a sober ride home. This girl asked if I minded, and I didn't, so we headed to the bar to get them. They were kind enough to be outside waiting for us when we got there. The parents were both leaning back on a railing above some concrete steps leading to an outside basement entrance. This girl waves at them and they wave back. Her dad lost his balance and went backwards over the railing. Her mum looked over and just started wailing. Made her stay in the car and call 911 while I went to see what happened. He had landed just right on the corner of one of the stairs and split his skull wide open, dead before I ever said a word to him. That relationship didn't last very long. Oh, I have a good one. My husband and I are older, like in our 40s, and have been dating about a year before I met his parents for the first time. They live on the other side of the country and flew out to visit him. His ex-girlfriend found out and showed up at the restaurant, sat down and dominated the conversation with all of the memories she had with the parents and my husband. It was awkward as heck. They can't stand her but are polite people, and this chick is such a hot mess. I was invited to a former boyfriend's house for dinner to meet his parents. When I got there, his father wasn't home yet from work, so we decided to go for a walk. Boyfriend's mother told us to be back at the house by 5, so we were playfully racing each other back so as to make it in time. I got to the door a few paces ahead of him, opened the door and found myself face to face with his dad, who was standing completely undressed in front of the door. I turned around and hid around the corner, and the father kind of yelped and ran down the hall, and we were both mortified. Turns out he came home and was getting ready to shower when the phone rang, so he answered it in the buck since he hadn't expected us back yet. In short, I saw his dad au naturel before I even saw him. Well, at least you could try and get a gauge on the family genes and what you might have to work with on your boyfriend later, so it's not all bad, right? I met my ex's mum when I was 15. They were a highly Catholic family and he wasn't allowed to date, so I would go over after school until it was about time for them to get home. So we were making out and my shirt and bra come off, which was pretty escalated for us. Then we heard a car door slam, he grabs my shirt and bra, hands them to me and tells me to go hide in his closet. So I do, shirtless. His mum and him talk for what seems like forever just outside the door. She tells him she's going to go take a nap, so to be quiet. After she went into her room, he came and got me. Right as I'm trying to get my bra on, she steps out of her room and sees me. We broke up soon afterwards. In short, got caught by a super Catholic mum shirtless in her son's closet. Not so much of a story, but just before I met his mum, my ex said to me, "My mom is like a shark. She can smell fear, so just don't be scared." Oh, okay. My ex-mum surprised him with a visit while we were mid-whoopee. My clothes somehow ended up all over the apartment, so I had to come out and greet her, wearing nothing but his shirt and pretending it was a dress. She knew. Did I mention she was one of my bosses? Met the father at the boyfriend's hockey game. He was sweet and bought me a hot chocolate and himself a coffee. About 5 minutes later, he gets booted from the arena for arguing with a ref and throwing his coffee at said referee's face. His mum asked us if we were, quote, dipping winkies, please bear in mind that I'm a female, and said if he ever needed protection for us to tell her we're hungry for Hardee's, and she'd know what we meant and wouldn't have to explain further, and that she would either give us money or go out and buy us protection. I was 14 at the time. I found out years later that she became pregnant and had a termination at 13, and she didn't want us to have to make that decision, so she was really just trying to be helpful. But it was a little much for the very first time meeting her. Sitting at dinner with the girlfriend and her parents, I'd just met them 10 minutes earlier, having casual conversations when I snarted. I tried to play it cool, but we all knew what happened. The worst part was about 30 seconds after the sneeze, after everyone had moved on, when the smell crept in. Meeting my now fiancé's mum for the first time, a few months afterwards started dating. She makes a comment about us making babies, half jokingly, and I nervously reply, "It's okay, we're enjoying practicing for now." My ex-boyfriend wanted me to meet his parents, and he told me they wanted to meet me too. We decided to drive up to their place in the Bay Area. We lived in Orange County at the time. We did this for Thanksgiving. I'm white, and he and thus his parents are Chinese. I normally wouldn't mention this, but apparently my whiteness made them not approve of me, and therefore not actually want to meet me. I didn't know they didn't want to meet me, otherwise I wouldn't have driven 6 hours and showed up at their house. When we knocked on their door, his mother answered, looked at me and said in Cantonese, "I told you not to bring the white girl here." More was said in Cantonese, and I understood none of it. To save money, his parents didn't have the boiler on, nor did they have heat in the house. Not having a boiler meant not having hot water and therefore not having showers. To remedy this, they had a membership at 24-Hour Fitness, where they went every night to have a shower. They insisted that we go to the 24-Hour Fitness for a shower, literally 15 minutes after showing up at their house. 24-Hour Fitness has communal showering. I'm absolutely terrified of communal showering. I had to get undressed with my boyfriend's mother 15 minutes after meeting her. At that point, she'd never spoken a word to me in English. The first actual communication she showed to me was to thrust a hairdryer in my hands. Anyway, the next few days were excruciatingly uncomfortable. Next to nothing was said in English at all, and I felt like everyone hated me. I spent several days just being as quiet, submissive, and polite as possible. I was sent to his mother's garden to pull weeds in the sun for a few hours, and after that, she apparently began liking me. Later in the week, she decided I needed a checkup at the doctor. For what reason, I don't know. Turns out she scheduled me for an exam of my lady parts conducted by a man who I don't know, a man who spoke in really broken English. I explained to her that I was not comfortable with any of this. It was horrible and embarrassing. In short, I got undressed with my boyfriend's mum 15 minutes after meeting her. She hated me, and later she scheduled me for a fricking pelvic exam and didn't bother explaining to me what was happening until we were there. And no, I didn't have that exam. I noped right out of there. Ouch. Yeah, I don't care how great that partner is. I think if that's happened, it's breakup time, right? There'd have to be a bombshell supermodel millionaire to make family meetings like that worthwhile. I met his mum and said, "Oh, this must be your grandmother."
See, this is why we always guess one generation down. Then it's either flattering or correct.
Her parents had an RV and were on vacation when we met. When they returned home, we were doing the deed in the shower. Her mum didn't expect anyone to be at the house with her and just walked in. We had done it everywhere in the house, and she was expecting them home the next day. Her dad introduced me to his 357 and told me to get the F out of his house. So I left. Brit here. Do American fathers actually shoot their daughters' boyfriends, or is it more of a statement? It's a stereotype, sometimes true and oftentimes not. My worst meet the parents situation was several years ago. I walked into his house and noticed framed photos on the wall. All of them were stills from when they were on the show Wife Swap. That in and of itself was no big deal until I saw the episode, but then father approached me and I stuck out my hand to shake, and he just looks me up and down, turns to his son and says, "Is she a subscriber to The Way?" And later on we were all having dinner, and his sister is telling the parents how she heard I was a working girl and they attempted to evangelize me. I went to pick her up and her mother was a parole officer. She photocopied my driver's license and made me wait around while she phoned somebody at the station to check my record. I was 16 and it was the winter formal. Her dad waved from across the room and I happened to be walking towards him and landed the most awkward high five of my life. I dated a Korean guy for a month or so in high school. I went to his house after school one day and encountered his dad on the sidewalk before he made it there. He looks at me, looks at his son, and begins pointing at me and yelling at him in Korean. I had to awkwardly stand there for about 5 minutes of them going back and forth before we parted ways and I just went home. Turns out he didn't want him dating a non-Korean. That's actually pretty common occurrence for the people who recently migrated from Korea. The grandparents will pretty much ignore their grandchildren if something like that happens. Dating a Japanese person is the worst, though. Current boyfriend has extremely Christian and somewhat square parents. They're very sweet, albeit sheltered. So he and I have a running joke that he uses me for nothing more than as a splooge bucket. So he texts and tells me he's at his parents' house. Unbeknownst to me, he hands his iPhone to his mum to look up a brownie recipe, and at that exact moment, I text him back, "Tell your parents your splooge bucket says hello," which of course popped up. She purportedly shrieked, and he now has a cracked screen. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I knocked up my girlfriend. She is Vietnamese. Talking to her mum on the phone, she somehow let it slip that she was pregnant. We had to cancel all plans immediately, drive over an hour to where they are, near the older brother's house, and discuss this with them. So picture the scene. Me, a giant white guy, and them, a tiny Asian family. The scene is a kitchen table with her mum, dad, sister, brother-in-law, and the girlfriend and I. There was about an hour of unbelievably awkward discussion and arguments in Vietnamese with me just sitting there. Everything turned out alright as our boy is 2 months old, today actually, and her parents and family love me. It was like Meet the Fockers, mixed with Knocked Up and Apocalypse Now. I met my wife online back in 1995 when I was 23 and she was a 19-year-old college student. She lived 9 hours away and I had no car, so when it was my turn to visit her, I got a cheap plane ticket. She came to pick me up at the airport around midnight, but parked her car in the wrong place. We returned to her spot to find that the car had been towed away. We took a cab to the impoundment lot and discovered that they wouldn't release the car to us because her parents owned the car. My poor long-distance girlfriend had to call her parents around 1 a.m. and ask them to drive to the impound lot, which was an hour away from their house, to get her car out so the two of us could drive back to her apartment for illicit unmarried relations. When her parents arrived, I introduced myself to her dad, shook his hand, and said, "I'm sorry we couldn't have met under better circumstances," and he just grunted at me. "Well, author, you married them in the end. I figure he might have got over it in the 16 years between the incident and you writing that story in 2011. If he still bears a grudge now in 2024, then I really admire your commitment to her. At least now your relations are post-marital." I met my wife, then girlfriend's parents once or twice before Christmas. However, I didn't really get the chance to meet the rest of her family, or really them for that matter. So when my girlfriend asked me to come over for the holidays, I thought it would be fun. Okay, something quick you have to know. My family doesn't celebrate holidays. I mean, we used to, but after a while, we just got lazy. So while we might go somewhere nice to eat on Christmas, we don't exchange gifts. And for some idiot reason, I didn't consider buying her family anything until I was an hour away from her house. Crap. So I quickly get some gifts from a shop that is surprisingly open. However, this place was just a step above a gas station. The mum got an ugly Christmas pillow and the dad got a collection of shot glasses. I gift wrap in the car and drive the rest of the way, not even realizing I forgot to get something for her brother. So I get there, put the gifts under the tree, I notice 8 gifts for me, and I try to play it cool. I seem to be making a good impression, and by the nighttime, I think I'm golden. I go to sleep with dreams of sugar plums and fairies. And frick, I'm sick. Abort! I wake up on Christmas morning projectile vomiting, all over this family quilt thing that they've put over me, and I run to the bathroom, chucking up all along the way. Lucky for me, no one woke up. I do my best to clean everything and go to bed for another hour. I wake up to Santa going round 2 to my stomach. I sit up and chuck up again. My girlfriend runs in, sees me and helps clean me up. I make her swear she won't tell anyone. I get up, take a shower, and by the time I'm out, Christmas breakfast is beginning. I make it through the breakfast, but as we sit down at the tree to open presents, I lose it again. I have never chucked up that sloppily in my entire life. I was like a fricking sprinkler during summer. Her mum screamed and jumped back, only to hit the couch wrong and topple over it. I run for the bathroom and there I am for 15 minutes. When I get back, I'm ashamed. The family cleaned up my chuck and tell me it's okay and that I should lay down. So I do. Christmas dinner is around the time I wake up. I'm sweating and shivering, and I barely remember I'm supposed to meet my girlfriend's grandparents tonight. They'd driven 5 hours to meet me. I stand up, get dizzy, and somehow end up on the floor again, where I decided to close my eyes for a few more minutes. And I crap myself. I'm not kidding. 1 minute I'm sort of zoning, and the next I feel this intense stomach cramp. Then I just do it. I crap myself. I lay there in my own number 2 for a minute as I hear the family outside laughing and spreading the cheer. They are loving the holidays and the togetherness, and I, on the other hand, am hating everything about this crappy situation. I text my girlfriend because that's all I can do. I say, I had an accident, come in here. She comes and asks where the puke is, and I just close my eyes, take a breath, and mutter, I crapped my pants. So my girlfriend helps me out of my pants and gets me some wipes, and I'm so freaking sick that I'm not even wiping correctly. And the entire time, my girlfriend is in and out of the room, throwing stuff away and grabbing more stuff. I hear her grandparents and parents talking about what's going on. At one point, I hear a knock on the door and it's her mum. She wants to check on me and the girlfriend screams, "Do not come in," which of course is the reason she comes in. So my girlfriend and her mother are in the room with a very sick me, trying their best to ignore the smell. Then I hear the fire alarm. The mum had forgotten to take something out of the oven because she was trying to help me. The good news is nothing was burned, but it's fun to add to the story. By the time the Christmas ham is being served, I'm back in bed, muttering my apologies. The next morning I wake up, and this is the worst part, I wake up feeling okay. So I thank everyone for the lovely time, say I have a work emergency, and bolt. Just freaking bolt. God, I hate Christmas. Wow, that sounds like a crap Christmas, pun intended. And again, you stuck around with this person after the incident, so one hopes that things with the in-laws are better now. I mean, they seemed very sweet and understanding. I'm sure it's come up many, many times since then, though. I was dating this girl for about 3 months and got her pregnant. We decided it was best if we just got married, as I was 27 and she was 20. I drove to my parents' house to tell them, and at the same time she went to her parents' house to tell them. I offered to go with her, but she said, "You don't know my dad," which was true because while she had met my parents, I'd never met hers. Sitting at my parents' house listening to them tell me how I was throwing my life away, the phone rings. It was my girlfriend. She said I needed to go over to her parents' house because they wanted to meet me. I showed up at their house and was escorted to the living room where I was asked to sit in a chair in the middle of the room. Her family sat in a semicircle around me and proceeded to grill me for 2 hours. What were you thinking? You're 7 years older than her. Are you some kind of pervert? How do you plan on supporting our daughter and grandchild? On and on. That was 20 years ago. I'm posting this from my in-laws' house, sitting next to my 19-year-old daughter. I'm still very much in love with my wife, and her family still hates me and sees me as the dirty old man that took their daughter away from them. I had to drive her to her mother, who was giving birth in hospital. That was when I first met her parents. Bonus points, she named the child the same name as me. The doctor said, "It's a boy." And her mum said, "I'll call him John." She then turns to her daughter. "Who's this with you?" Mom, meet John." In hindsight, I could have pretended I was her child that had travelled back from the future to witness his own birth. Frick, that would have been weird. Oh, I have a good one. It's not a relationship type meet the parents, but it is the worst experience I've had with someone's parents outside of my dysfunctional family. My friend is the son of one of the physics professors at my university, so when I got introduced to my future instructor, because I decided to major in physics, I was forced to make some small talk. He also prepared a lovely dinner for us too. I had no clue he had 3 other children in the family, so he started talking about them. We talked a lot about how his oldest was in Germany and his second oldest skipped a grade. That was my friend. I started spacing out and instead focused on the food and how good it was. At this time, he mentioned that his youngest daughter was at Girl Guides. And right when he said that, I let out the most satisfying to signify that I was really enjoying his food. I then clued back into the conversation and said, "Girl Guides, yeah, I like them," which was a mistake when I quickly realized what I'd just said after I could see my friend holding back laughter, but I just sat there and ate my food in silence. He gave me this really weird look, and I don't think he's looked at me the same since, even after being my instructor for 6 upper-level physics classes. We never spoke of it again, but my friend likes to bring it up every so often. In short, I meet my future physics professor over dinner, and his first impression of me is that I'm some creep who really enjoys Girl Guides. She only had her mother, and her father passed away when she was young. I go to her house and wait for her to get home and meet her mum. She has a bottle of IDOW's on the table. Her mum was pleasant and not too drunk at the time, and she offers me a drink. I normally don't drink the hard stuff, but I decided to be polite and take it. Her mother gets a phone call, and apparently my new girlfriend is going to be about 2 hours late. The mother sits down next to me on the couch and tells me. Then the unthinkable happens. Her mum, not very attractive by the way, puts her hand on my upper thigh. She says we have 2 hours if I'm interested, and smiles. Now at the time, I'm only 18, but I had enough common sense to get the frick out real quick. I met up with my girlfriend later on that night, and I don't even bring up what happened, because what good could it do, right? 2 days later, my girlfriend shows up at my house and is wide-eyed. Her breath is labored. She ran to my house. She tells me that one of her best friends just told her that he slept with her mum. I ask when that happened, and she said 2 nights ago. So I made the right choice. When I was 15, I met my then-girlfriend's father as he drove us home from a school dance. I had my arm around her. He asked if my arm was broken. I replied that it was not. He asked me if I wanted it to stay that way, so I removed my arm from around my girlfriend. When did you get a punishment that sounded easy but was actually horrifying? As a kid, when I did do something wrong, I'd have to write a sentence 100 to 500 times as punishment. I remember having to sit in the car at a family reunion at probably 7 years old writing, "I am a bad girl," 500 times because I'd taken a granola bar without asking. Writing, "I am a bad girl" that many times, repeated for minor infractions, and sentences like, "I am a liar and no one likes liars," or "I ruined the day for my family," just sticks with you and becomes internalized. I'm 31 now. It's been a good 15 years since I've had to write these, but I still think them about myself. Bread and water rations. It was there to cause weaponized constipation. 30 days of constant abdominal pain specifically tailored to humiliate is a lot worse than, "Oh, bland food, boo-hoo." Standing on concrete. The World War II Germans called them Stehrbunker. Stalin called them Kishka, but it's all the same idea. A cell so small you're forced to stand because there isn't enough room to sit. Standing barefoot on concrete for days is beyond brutal. It won't kill you, but it will, slowly and very painfully, cripple you while keeping you awake for days straight. Something I actually did to myself, I needed to cut weight for a wrestling tournament in a drastic way. Because of a mix-up in weight classes, I needed to drop 16 pounds overnight. I told my coaches that wasn't possible, just pull me from the roster. But my head coach pulls me aside and tells me there might be a way, and you don't even have to work out. What you do is fill up a bathtub with the hottest water you can stand and add a bag of Epsom salt and some rubbing alcohol to the water. Go into the bathroom with a buddy, stuff towels under the doors so cool air can't get in, and then get in the tub neck deep. After 60 seconds, your body will already be screaming to get out of the water because you're overheating. I stayed in for 45 minutes, adding more hot water every 2 to 3 minutes to ensure the hell never ended. The buddy is there to make sure you don't die. I sweat out 11 pounds in 45 minutes. Afterwards, I chewed some gum that's covered in citric acid that causes salivation, and I spit out the other 5 pounds over about 2 hours. So, the narrator doesn't think this seems possible, but there were many other replies to this story confirming things like this that wrestlers have endured to lose sudden amounts of weight that don't seem medically advisable to me. Teachers who recommend that high school students do this to themselves are possibly endangering their kids, surely. Insane stuff. Peeling salted sunflower seeds with your bare hands. I had the choice between that and getting my butt beaten with a cable when I screwed up big time when I was 6 years old. I chose the peeling, and I regretted that immensely. It doesn't sound bad at first, but let me tell you, after 1 hour, you just want to hold your hands in ice water. Your fingertips get sore, sometimes you prick your skin, and the salt dries out your fingernails and makes them really sensitive. Not to mention that the salt creeps up your nail bed and hurts like all hell, especially if you rip your skin near your fingernails. I never chose that punishment again. Outlawry. To be declared an outlaw. Today we think of an outlaw as just anybody who breaks the law regularly. Back in the day though, it was a punishment. If you were declared outlaw, that meant you were literally outside of the law, and could claim no protection from it. If someone didn't like you, they could freely beat you, rob you, torture you, or even kill you. When the stories refer to Robin Hood as an outlaw, that's what they're talking about. It's not a romantic, heroic, swashbuckling thing. It's the state of having no claim to any legal protection at all. The king, or whoever he appoints, takes your land, and anyone who wants it can take your stuff, and anyone who doesn't like you can just beat you to death without consequence. They can also put a bounty on your head and have people hunt you to claim it. What do you think would happen if you lost all protection from the law, and anyone who brought your head to the courthouse could claim a year's salary as a reward? Having to play with chickens. My grandpa always told me when the neighborhood kid would misbehave, this was like 100 years ago since then, his parents would lock him into the chicken habitat and put some liquid or meat on his feet. The chickens would peck at his feet and he would have to flee constantly until he was too tired to, and then he would be released. Kneeling on grains of uncooked rice. Goat licking. In medieval times, you'd get your feet strapped between 2 wooden boards and they'd be sprinkled in salt or something similar so that animals, mainly goats, would lick them. Seems like it would tickle at first, but they won't stop licking. Apparently, they'd lick the flesh off until they hit bones. Having been licked by a cat for like a minute or so, I can imagine this is an awful torture. Being forced to keep your arms up all the time. This was a punishment my dad enforced after bare-bottom spankings stopped working. To get out of those, I would laugh even though they hurt like heck because I knew he'd get angry and stop. I'd have to stand against a wall with my hands in the air for hours, and if they moved down, the punishment would get longer. My dad told me about a punishment that was given in schools when he was growing up. He was born in 1954, which was when you had to go to the side of the aisle of desks and squat down into the Asian or Russian squat stance, and then hold it for the rest of the class. He said it never sounded bad, but after a while your muscles and knees would lock up, and at the end of the class, in order to get out of the position, you had to fall onto your side or back to the floor to let your legs relax enough to allow you to move and use them. He told me when I was super young, but it's always stuck with me because I was so surprised that something so seemingly small would cause so much pain and loss of control. You essentially got insane Charlie horses when you dropped out of the position. You shouldn't be happy with getting away with a crime by pleading insanity. Instead of a time-definite custodial sentence, you get an indefinite custodial sentence in an underfunded and terrifying medical facility. Maybe for the rest of your life. Yay! Tickling. No joke, the Germans used this in World War II as a form of torture in some cases. It doesn't leave a mark, so it's also used in environments like mental facilities, where patients may be restrained and staff go on a power trip. Extreme cases can result in incontinence, vomiting, and a loss of consciousness due to the inability to breathe. It's also easier for the torturer to do it for a long time without it wearing away at their conscience because the victim is involuntarily laughing, so it's easy to pretend it's not that bad. Being ignored or ostracized. It might not sound like much, but as humans we need that social contact, and leave it too long, and it becomes incredibly damaging. I hate being confused for an ostrich as well, but it's very much damaging to my self-esteem, as I'm so sensitive about my big pointy nose and my knobbly knees. Jokes aside, yeah, being socially alone is a really underrated grim punishment of life. Listening to the same song on loop, then skipping parts of the song. This was a form of torture used by the CIA, and it's absolutely awful. Closing your hand around a chunk of saltwater ice and holding it there. Dubbed the Salt and Ice Challenge, where people would hold onto it for as long as they can stand, it can lead to frostbite injuries similar to second- and third-degree burns. It also essentially fuses to your skin, so if you try to open your hand, it will rip off your skin. You need to use warm water to detach it. I did this about 20 years ago before it was a thing on social media. It sucks. With the attention this is getting, I feel obligated to say definitely do not try this. Isolation. There's a reason solitary confinement is considered a form of torture. The human mind isn't designed to function in an environment devoid of stimulation or social interaction. It was cool going to Alcatraz and doing the audio tour, actually. You get to go into one of the solitary confinement cells with the doors closed behind you, and it's pitch black, and while you're in there, you hear stories from inmates, dramatically read, about what it was like and how some of them would focus their mind until they could see a tiny speck, and within that they could conjure an imaginary television screen and see moving images. It helped them to stop going crazy. Standing at parade rest without being able to talk for 5 hours. In basic training, someone got caught stealing food from the DFAC no more than 20 minutes after we'd been yelled at for people doing that. As a punishment, we stood at parade rest from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. without being able to talk and with at least one DS watching us at all times. I don't know how to describe it, but your brain can only come up with so much to do for 5 hours while not moving. Oh, we had a guy purposefully lock his knees so he'd pass out. Apparently there are clever ways to get out of some of these punishments. I can't remember what country used it, Russia or Japan I think, but one punishment was genuinely known as the white. You'd be given white clothes, locked in a cell with white walls, with no windows and a completely white door. You'd get a light bulb on a white fixture but no light shade. Your bed and its linens would also be white, and you'd be fed exclusively on white rice, in a white bowl with white cutlery, and to drink you'd get water in a white cup. After a day or two you'd begin to hallucinate because of the lack of visual stimulation. Chinese water drop torture. Victims were strapped down so that they couldn't move, and cold or warm water was then dripped slowly to a small area of the body, usually the forehead. The forehead was found to be the most suitable point for this form of torture because of its sensitivity. Prisoners could see each drop coming, and after long durations they were gradually driven frantic as a perceived hollow would form in the center of their foreheads. You're sort of right. They were blindfolded and leaned back. You were also restrained and maybe had earplugs or rags stuffed in your ears. They removed all other senses. They'd also vary the rate of the drops. The torture comes in when you throw off their sense of time. They have no idea when to expect the next drop. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Painting rocks. A couple of guys in my AITA unit got in trouble, and the sadistic drill sergeant tried being creative with an approved punishment, which was painting rocks. As dumb a punishment as it is, the sadistic side was that this training unit was in southern Arizona during peak summer temperatures. The rocks were literally hot enough to fry an egg on, and both privates' hands ended up being covered with second-degree burns. The drill sergeant faced pretty heavy administrative action. I don't recall exactly what, but it was probably one of the most severe I've ever heard a drill sergeant receive. Waterboarding. If any of you kids don't know, there was this big debate back in the early 2000s. Some people were calling it torture, and others were more or less like, "It's literally just pouring water on someone's face. What's the big deal?" Now, when you put it like that, yeah, what's a big deal? Take someone, make them lay down, and hold them down so they can't move, then pour water on their face. What's the big deal? I remember one conservative radio host got the bright idea to prove live and on the air that it's not as bad as they're saying by having his staff waterboard him on air. And you know what? I respect the guy for doing this. He had a strongly held belief and he was willing to go through it to try and prove his point. He lasted all of 15 seconds before he tapped out of it, hacked and coughed for about 5 seconds, and finally managed to say, "Definitely torture," before suggesting they take a break so he could recover from that. Good on him for admitting that he was wrong. It gives the narrator a good chuckle to think about the other listeners who presumably were already minds made up that they agreed with his first point of view, and you've got to wonder whether that changed any of their minds. Most people are so entrenched about this sort of thing. When visiting Africa, we learned that some places have their own form of lethal injection for criminals, by snakebite. Committers of the unspeakable act and murderers would be forced to receive a bite on both ankles from a puff adder. After officials verified the bites, they'd be sent home, under supervision, to spend their last days with their family. Some people thought it sounded like a more humane form, but it's not. When I was around 10 years old, being forced to stand in the corner of the living room with my parents and siblings in the room and stare at the wall for hours. Kneeling in salt. When I was 16, my mother told me that if I kept my attitude up, I'd be kneeling in salt. Being a dumb kid, I was like, oh, whatever, it's just salt. Well, I kept that attitude up, and my mum sprinkled a light dusting of salt on the tile floor in the kitchen, and I had to kneel in salt for an hour. The grains cut my knees and burned the wounds. I'm 32 now, and I still have scars on my knees. I will add this before the replies come in. I know that this was not good parenting. My mum was pregnant at the time and not in a good place mentally. My sister is now 16 and has never even had as much as a slap. Just recently, my sister told me she thinks I was just a bad kid if mum did all of that to me. I told my mother about the conversation afterwards, and my mother said, "You weren't a bad kid, none of you were. I just had a temper and I didn't know how to control it." I'll admit I'm an adult now and with 2 kids of my own, and hearing her say that made me cry on the way home. I knew in my head I wasn't a bad child. I rarely got into trouble, never did substances, I just had an attitude. But I hadn't realized how heavy my heart was from the punishments. I was the first of 3 kids, I got the worst of it, and I always blamed myself. Even when I was finally over it and rebuilt a relationship with my mum, I blamed myself. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear her say that until she did. This was 3 weeks ago, and I'm tearing up just typing this. My cousin, at 10 years old, quite agile, never sits still. Once he troubled my aunt so much that she punished him. His punishment was to sit still on the bed and do nothing. No TV, no playing either on the phone or with his toys, not even speaking. No one was allowed to come to his room so that he can't even watch others. He asked her if he could read his textbooks as he thought studying would lessen her anger, but she denied him even doing that. He had to sit completely still. Initially, that punishment seemed quite simple to me, but what impact it had on this small child was huge. This punishment tortures you by boring you, which a small child can't take. At last, he broke down crying, after which he was pardoned. Okay, I'm stretching the definition of a light punishment here by a long way, but when I heard of death by 1,000 cuts, I thought it would be someone giving you a bunch of cuts until you bled out. Painful, a bit extreme, but the reality is actually much worse. It turns out cuts is a bit of a mistranslation, and it should really be slices. The executioner slices big chunks off your body systematically, up to muscles and whole limbs, with the aim of keeping you alive as long as possible. There are a handful of pictures of the process being done, which are just about the most horrific things I've ever seen. It's kind of lost its sting from popular overexposure, but crucifixion is one of the most agonizing deaths humankind has ever come up with. Just the muscle cramps alone from staying in one position for hours is enough to put it in the running, and the constant near strangulation, competing with the pain from the nails, is probably the main draw. The white room punishment. Everything white, tasteless, no sound, room temperature kept at body temperature, if I remember correctly. Just a bed, toilet, water and food, nothing that could be used in any way to alleviate the boredom. It doesn't seem that big at first, just nothing to do for a while, but it's in truth some of the worst torture one can experience. Famine walls. This was something I'd never heard of until I took a trip to Ireland and saw them firsthand. These were famine walls, and they were built during the famine of the 1840s as a means to keep the hungry masses out of the estates of the landowners. We learned it was the usually homeless Catholics who built the walls, for a few scraps to eat. According to our guide, massively, largely pointless work projects like the famine walls and the famine roads kept the masses barely alive during the 4 years that the potato crop failed. The British rule had proclaimed that the poor had to work for sustenance and not be given charity or allowed to beg. Just think about how demoralizing this would be. Day after day, building stone walls with zero purpose, just to earn your bread and soup for the day. The shocking thing is the scope of the famine walls. They're literally everywhere on the countryside as far as you can see. It's really insane just how horrifically a lot of Ireland was decimated by the English in the last couple of centuries, and how little of that is present at face value in British schooling on the old empire. They're starting to come to terms with what they did in their more distant colonies, but just how much they mistreated and massacred their Western neighbours really doesn't seem to get around much in your average Brit's education from what I've seen. That farm pit punishment they used to use in Eastern Europe, where the criminal is made to stand in a pit on a hog farm for a day, which starts out empty, but then the hog manure pours in with them as the hogs produce it. I'm always shocked by the number of people who consider it better than jail when it's brought up just because it's only a day. That sounds similar to the chicken poop prison in Thailand. You'd end up with severe respiratory illness due to the ammonia. People rarely survived a month, and former inmates were left with chronic lung disease and PTSD. Your mum saying she's not mad at you, just disappointed. My dad is the king of cruel and unusual punishments. He forced me and my brother to drink pint after pint of water without allowing us to use the toilet. Made me run up and down stairs when I was 9 for hours on end until I confessed to something I didn't do. Doesn't sound bad until you actually do it. My friend once proposed a punishment for people who mistreat animals, sort of as a joke. They'd be locked in a small cell for a few days, which is then pumped full of the heavy smell of dog breath. Apparently, most people, including me, thought that sounded very light for the crime, until asked to actually visualize it. When I did, I literally gagged at the thought. Having bamboo shoots grow beneath you while tied down. In my home country, the penalty for the unspeakable act and substance trafficking is whipping, with no limit, a specific number to be set by the judge. First, they clinically clear you for the punishment. Then they get you in a bent-over pose while your butt is visible through a wooden frame. The torturer, a man in a legitimate black hood, shows up and dips a horsewhip in medicine. The medicine serves two purposes. Firstly, it helps with slight healing during the whipping, in order to allow the prisoner more lashes during that sitting. And secondly, because the medicine is sticky, it causes the whip to stick and tear flesh from the butt whenever it cracks. My teenaged cousin wanted a government or town summer job where he could work out and work on his tan all day. My uncle was angry at him for thinking all government jobs were cushy, sit on your butt kinda do nothing things. So for him, he found him a job as a gravedigger in a local cemetery. He was in the sun all day and got tons of exercise. Wrapping your fingers tightly with a thinner duct tape or anything string-like but with an adhesive for minutes, with the tip of the fingers left out. Restricting any blood flow to the tips of your fingers isn't child's play, provided you're restrained and can't do anything with the pain, stings like heck. Parents should not make their kids eat soap for saying a bad word. It's really horrible for them. Usually the kids picked up the word from the parents, and even if they didn't, it's needlessly cruel. Silent treatment and stonewalling, especially coming from a loved one. It creates a terrible imbalance in the relationship and serious psychological trauma on the stonewalled individual. No one should ever choose this method to punish the other. Buck ragging for kids. Making a kid breathe in buck or male deer urine on a rag. It smells so bad. Everyone I knew as a kid who received it said it was their most feared punishment. Everyone who didn't said it's just a gross rag. How could 5 minutes of that be bad? Your teacher shaming you in front of all of your classmates for giving a wrong answer. When did someone try a crazy or cringe pickup on you? Let me start my story by stating the fact that I am very, very pregnant. I am so hugely and obviously pregante that people feel the need to approach me in public and offer their condolences for how pregnant I am. I'm not kidding. Men and women alike have stopped me just to say, "You poor thing, I'm so sorry. You look miserable." That's how purgent I happen to be at the moment. That being said, my favorite place to be in the entire world is in a pool. Swimming makes me feel like a normal human being. The swelling in my hands and feet goes down, the pressure on my hips vanishes, my belly button goes back to being an innie. It's wonderful. Anyway, last weekend my friend texts me and asks if I'm up for a swim. I certainly am up for a swim. However, it's a little after 8:30 and my condo's pool closes at 9. We decide to go to the pool at her apartment complex as it's open until 10. We make our way out to the pool, where the only occupant is a middle-aged guy wearing a swim cap and goggles. I don't pay him any mind, I just figure it's a resident doing some evening laps. No big deal. He watches us get in the pool and says something I can't make out. I ask him to repeat himself and he just says, "I'll swim over there." Okay. So my friend and I start chatting about nothing in particular and Mr. Swimcap starts awkwardly butting into our conversation. He wasn't trying to add to it, he would just ask random questions, only we couldn't make out what he was trying to say. So we kind of brushed him off and he started swimming around the pool and keeps accidentally swimming into us. Keep in mind, he's wearing goggles. So we move to another part of the pool and try to act like nothing's happening. He stops trying to swim into us and just starts staring at us. Then he says something, and the conversation goes as follows. "Who wanna date?" I say, "What? Who wanna go date?" "Dude, I can't understand what you're trying to say." "Would you want to go on a date?" I pause. "Are you talking to me or her?" And I motion towards my non-pregnant friend. You. I think you're really attractive. Do you want a date?" No, I'm very flattered, but no thank you." "So you don't want a date?" No, I don't want to go on a date with you." "You have a man?" "Yeah, I have a man. We're fixing to have a baby." "Do you live together?" "Yes, we do." "So you don't want to go on a date?" "No. Dude, no, I don't want to go on a date with you." "But would you?" "Would I what?" "Go on a date with me. I think you're a really attractive person." "No, I'm done talking to you now. Please leave us alone." I go back to my friend and we start discussing exit strategies, as the guy continues to talk to himself. Luckily, my friend's male neighbor decided to come and hang out for a bit, and Mr. Swimcap starts ranting at the neighbor about who knows what. Mortgage companies, maybe. So we try to enjoy the remainder of our time in the pool. A little while later, the security guard comes by to lock up. My friend, her neighbor, and I bolt out of there while Mr. Swimcap is gathering his things. Good guy neighbor walks me to my car to ensure there are no creepers lurking about. Look, there are pregnant women who are single, attractive, and who might be very receptive to going on dates. But it's a real big swing to ask them, and you've got to learn to take no for an answer no matter what you're into. And I do kind of wonder whether this guy was specifically interested in her because she was pagante, or whether he thought literally any woman dating him was a win at that point and that her standards for some reason might be lower because she was pergonant. In any case, weird messed up dude. Gave a speech for a class once, and after my speech ended, I went to take a leak and get a drink. On the way back to class, a cute Asian girl from the class was in the hall, looking like she was waiting for someone. I assumed her boyfriend, since he was also in the class with us. She saw me and lit up and asked if I wanted to join her for a cig. I don't smoke, but I obliged to keep her company since other people's speeches suck, and we headed outside. We joked around a bit, she tried flirting, but I have a girlfriend and didn't reciprocate. Figured she was just a bubbly person. Right when we were about to head back, she hands me a slip of paper with her number and says, "You should give me a call later today. We can get high and get to know each other better." I ask about her boyfriend and she says, "He's working later." I of course politely declined, went back to class, and spent the rest of the day wondering why the scenarios straight from the script of an adult movie always happen when I'm in happy, committed relationships, but never when I'm single. When we got back to class, she gave her boyfriend a peck on the cheek and sat back down next to him. I was walking down the street in the middle of December, hands stuffed in my pea coat, walking behind a young man who looks pretty paranoid. He finally stops and asks, Do you have a piece?" I pull my hands out of my pocket and shrug. "Nope, no weapon." "Oh, do you have any green herb?" "Nope, dude, sorry." "Oh, do you have a boyfriend?" Priorities, man. Priorities. I was walking down a street in Berkeley, often lined with older homeless guys and panhandlers. It was a warm day, so I was wearing a cute but modest black and white polka dot 50s style dress that always got me a lot of attention from the men. Anyways, walking by two older guys sitting on the sidewalk near each other, but far away enough not to encroach on each other's change-seeking turfs, when the first one I pass hollers something to the effect of, "Hey girl, let me see that dress on my bedroom floor." Ironic because, well, you know. To which the second homeless guy responds, without missing a beat, "Hey, don't you talk to my wife that way. She's a lady." In short, random Berkeley bum defended my honor. I was arrested in high school for a spontaneous bout of stupidity, and as I got into the cop car, I realized that there was a teenager doing a ride-along with the cop. I don't think much of it, seeing as that, I was pretty busy focusing on how much trouble I was going to be in. A few days later, as I settled into my permanent grounding, I got on Facebook. Lo and behold, I have a Facebook message. The boy doing the ride-along with the cop had written down my contact information and found me on Facebook just so that he could send me, "Hey girl, I just wanted you to know that I hated arresting a woman as beautiful as you." I was walking down the street with my mother. As it was summertime, I was in shorts and platform sandals, which were in fashion at the time. I walked by two guys, and one of them starts telling me he loves me and he wanted to go out with me. My mum asks him if he was crazy, to which he replied, "I'm crazy for her. I was 9. I was hanging out with a friend the day before Easter. She had to drop by another friend's house for a quick errand, so I went with her. They had an Easter party going on for this woman's children and a few of her friends. The parents were having a barbecue, and the kids had done an Easter egg hunt and moved on to painting pictures for their parents. A normal enough fellow started chatting with me, and after about 10 minutes with the group, I realized he was there with his 2-year-old and the baby's mum. I wasn't sure if they were together, but I just assumed they were and left it at that. So when we went to leave, I was totally taken aback when he pulled me from the doorway where everyone was saying goodbye to each other. He shook my hand and whispered, "Shh, it was so great to meet you. Shh." He put his finger to his lips, winked, and then turned me back around to face the group. I just stumbled through my normal goodbyes and left without acknowledging him. While walking away, I unfolded what had slipped me while shaking my hand. It was his number and a note that said, "You're cute. Text me," torn from a large chunk of the Easter painting his child had proudly handed him 10 minutes before. In short, Father of the Year destroys his child's masterpiece to hit on me in broken English, in front of his baby mama. Quality bloke. I wonder if she took him up on his offer. Oh, whoops. Guess she just threw that number into the trash can in the same kitchen that it was handed to her next to. What are the chances? Walking down the main street of a medium-sized town with my girlfriend and her sister. An all-right guy in an all-right-looking car, maybe about 22 to 25, pulls up and shouts to the sister, "Hey, you in the blue, come get in the car, go with me." They were married 4 months later. Last I heard, it was still going strong, but that's been a while. I didn't say anything at the time because I thought she knew the guy, and later I was annoyed at her. "I'm pretty sure she's messing with you and she knew him somehow." My parents were walking through Target when this stumpy guy walks up to my mum. He says, "Sugar zero, sugar zero, sugar zero." Mum laughs and asks him what he means, and the guy goes, "If anyone asks, you can tell them that I whispered sweet nothings to you." My dad was laughing too hard to care. In short, Mum got told sweet nothings by a gnome. I have very, very long hair. It reaches below my knees. If it helps you visualize, I'm a slim Asian female. "Damn, girl, your hair be crazy, like a motherfucking horsetail." "Hey, you should know I'm a total stallion, babe." This guy leans in really close and starts stroking it. I get the frick out of there as fast as possible. He calls after me in a gruff plead, "Oh, come on, girl, let me see if all your hair be that long and beautiful." I briskly walk away, but not before I hear him turn back towards a buddy and swear, "He thinks I've got a crazy long bush?" I've also just had a guy grab my chest out of nowhere. I punched him on the ear. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I got a new job teaching computer courses to adult classes of adult learners. I go to check out an apartment I found on Craigslist near my new job. The renter and I exchange some emails. I tell her about my job and she tells me about the nutrition supplement she sells. She also tells me entirely too much about her life, her ex-husband, and her custody battle over her 13-year-old son. Boundary issues. Got it. But I respond very sympathetically towards her because I'm a people pleaser with my own boundary issues. We hit it off. The address is a house and I figure it must be a duplex of some sort. The renter invites me in. She's a 40-something-year-old woman, fairly attractive, and I'm in my early 20s at the time. She introduces me to her son, who's in the living room playing Guitar Hero. Then she shows me the room, which is just off the living room, separated by a curtain. I tell her I'm surprised, I thought she'd listed an apartment. No, she explains, it's just the room, but it comes furnished with the dresser and this waterbed. Don't worry about the curtain, she says, you'll have plenty of privacy. You just need to turn this fan on. She turns the fan on. She sits on the bed and asks me if I like waterbeds. I tell her I've never been on one. She invites me onto the bed with her. I demur, she cajoles, and promises me it will be fun. I don't get hit on much. I'm a good-looking guy but quiet, and I'm just not used to having signals sent my way. But at this point, I put it together that she's inviting me to engage in hanky-panky, while her son is 15 feet away, on the other side of a curtain. I'll admit, I was interested despite my common sense, but common sense did win the day. I get out of there as quickly as possible and tell her I'll have to think about the room situation. Epilogue: the next week, guess who shows up at my level 1 Windows Vista class? And guess who pretended he'd never seen her before in his life? This guy. It seems like you definitely should have gone through with it to avoid that social situation, dear commenter. But in all seriousness, that is an awkward proposition, especially with her offspring in listening distance. I was waiting for the last train from Paris to go back to my good old suburbs. So this is right after midnight. The station was quite empty, only a few people left around. I should probably mention that I'm a girl and alone. Anyway, I have about 15 minutes left to wait, and this old guy just comes and sits next to me. After a few minutes, he gets the courage to ask me, "Could I ask you a favor?" "Sure." "Oh, never mind, it's okay." He looked really sad and miserable about something, so I tried to be nice and insist, thinking he's just going to want to talk about something. Could I see your feet?" "Excuse me?" "I think you have beautiful feet. Could I just see them? I won't touch or anything. I just want to look. You can keep your socks on if you want." At that point, I'm quite weirded out. I was wearing some Converse, and this guy was making me feel bad for telling him I don't want to show him my feet. He kept insisting with this miserable look on his face. He even suggested to get on the next train, and if there's too many people, I don't have to if I'm being shy or something. I actually felt like I had to apologize to him because I didn't want to show him my feet. In short, I apologized to a creeper who wanted to see my feet. As a bonus, on the same night I got off the train and walking towards my dad's car, waiting for me, another car drops their window and someone mumbles at me, "Hey, what's your name?" At which I'm too tired to think and mechanically reply like they're asking something from me. "Sorry, I don't have a name." I felt embarrassed at the time about being so dumb, but it turns out it's a quite funny way to get rid of weirdos. So I witnessed this at a bar one night. This was at a college bar in California. Anyways, this young couple were sitting at the table next to mine and it was apparent they were dating, holding hands, smiling at each other constantly, among other things, and were minding their own business when out of nowhere a guy in his early 20s and clearly a bit drunk walks up to their table and looks at the girl for a second, then glances at the guy and says, "Hey guy, mind if I talk to your sister?" Well, hearing this, I look over at the boyfriend and he has this look on his face that just screams, "What the frick?" So here's how the rest of the conversation goes. Boyfriend says, "She's my girlfriend, man, so yeah, I mind." "You're dating your sister? Isn't that illegal?" "No, she's not my sister, she's my girlfriend." "Oh, so she was your sister and now she's your girlfriend." "No, leave us alone, kid." At this point, the drunk guy turns around and yells for his friend to come over. "Hey, come over here, this guy's dating his sister." So the next thing I know, this well-groomed and dressed guy, clearly gay, comes over to the table to see what kind of trouble his buddy is getting into. "He's dating his frickin' sister." "Isn't that illegal?" "That's what I said." Well, now the couple are pretty annoyed and the girl suggests to her boyfriend that they go somewhere else. As they gather their things and start to walk away, the second guy walks up to the girl and says, "Hey, would you mind if I talk to your brother?" And this look of horror spreads across her face as she realizes the gay guy wants to talk to her man. They basically ran out of the bar and the two guys busted up laughing from the reaction they got. In short, mind if I talk to your sister? I'm trying to figure out which one was the wingman. I was in the back seat of my friend's truck with a girl I just met riding home one day. I make small talk, maybe 2 minutes of pleasantries are exchanged. Throughout the ordeal, I'm totally enthusiastic and just the embodiment of suave. I ask her, "Do you have a boyfriend?" "No." "Do you want one?" "Oh, you're serious?" "Yeah, babe." "Sure." I'll never be that cool again. Keep in mind, I'm normally fairly shy around new people. In short, I felt like Fabio. I think this might be one of the rare instances the narrator has read about where that level of boldness in the company of other friends no less, has actually worked out for the better and not in a humiliating rejection. Then again, the rejection stories are the ones that are generally the juiciest, according to your comments, you disaster-craving weirdos. No judgment, they're more fun for me to read too. My mum was working at her pharmacy job at the pickup counter when a man came up to her and gave her a pickup line something along the lines of, "Hey, I'm not here to pick up medicine, I'm here to pick you up." That man is my father. There used to be this veteran who went to my college and always wore his uniform, and he used to hit on me in the creepiest ways until I reported his butt. It started off just as friendly banter every once in a while, until one night he has me cornered alone in the bus shelter. "I bet you taste good, little princess, like cotton candy." I walked down to the next bus stop. I was riding my bike and got hit by a car. The guy stopped and we exchanged information. I got a call later and it's him asking me if I was alright, which I thought was normal and nice of him, but then he follows it up with if I'd want to get lunch with him. He then proceeded to call me every day, leaving messages like, "You want to get lunch? I'm really hungry." You don't break a person's tailbone and then ask them out. When I'm drunk, I always seem to want to hit on lesbians. I always have a very good time too, and I've gotten a few numbers, but it's not like I was trying to convert them or something, so I always wake up the next morning wondering what the frick I was trying to pull. I made a few good friends that way though. My girlfriend and I were walking along the beach in San Diego last year. An older gentleman, probably late 50s or so, came up to me and said, "Son, if I had your body and my money, I'd be unstoppable. How about we put the two of them together?" My girlfriend just about fell over laughing while I tried to politely decline. As we walked away, he let me know, "You're even more fine watching from behind." I still haven't lived that one down. I was walking back to my car one night and a group of young guys were hanging out on the sidewalk, taking up most of the width of it. My friend and I had to walk through their group. As we walked through, a guy stepped in really close to me and whispered, "Girl, I'll buy you Starbucks every night." I had no idea how to respond, so I just smiled and kept walking. But later, I had to wonder, do non-white men think that the way to a preppy-ish looking white woman's heart is the promise of Starbucks runs? Because, well, he's kind of right, I guess. This isn't mine, as I've never been hit on, but when I was going to college, I was sitting in the cafeteria with a group of about 11 people who all knew each other and were D&D nerds together. There were 4 very attractive girls in this group. One kind of sweat-smelling, mouth-breathing, newish guy who'd only recently joined our little group leans over to one of the girls in the group and brags about how he can do a perfect Zap Brannigan impersonation. She asks to see and he goes, "If I said you had a beautiful body, would you take your pants off and dance around a little?" in Zap's voice. We laugh in that awkward, not sure if he's an unspeakable act offender way, and I have to leave for class. The next day, he gets to the table before the girl from earlier does, strikes a heroic pose and says, "Kipf, I've made it with a woman. Inform the men." The girl is mortified that he not only told everyone, but told everyone in Zap Brannigan's voice. Fortunately, he had the good sense to be too embarrassed to show his face again after that. In short, Zap Brannigan's pickup lines apparently work. I was at a beach with 3 other friends. It was a weekday, so there wasn't a crowd, but a bearable amount of people to handle. We were enjoying ourselves and my friend and I were just floating about and talking, when I then noticed this tan guy not too far away from us. He was staring straight at us with an extremely creepy, perverted grin. We decided to swim back to shore and started to take pictures, and guess who decides to come along? Creepy tanned guy. At this point, we still haven't really reacted, but then he starts running back and forth on the beach, never taking his eyes away from me and my group. He eventually starts doing his little running routine closer and closer to us. When we thought it couldn't get weirder than that, it did. Every time he ran towards us, he slowed down, eyed us up and down, then smiled his creepy smile and began chanting. He was chanting actual gibberish, no English words or any language you would recognize. It was like he was performing a frickin' ritual on us. It was creepy as heck. In short, creepy dark tan guy tried to hit on me and my friends using some mystic ritual at the beach. What is the most messed up bombshell someone has dropped into a casual conversation with you? One year at the cottage, we met a family who was renting a cottage across the bay for the weekend, which consisted of a mum, dad, a 25-ish-year-old sister, and a younger sister who was maybe around 7 or 8. One afternoon, the parents decided to tell my mum that the older sister is actually the younger sister's mother, but they're raising her to believe that they are her biological parents. I can't imagine this stayed secret for much longer, seeing as they'd told my mum after speaking to her for maybe about half an hour? We were visiting my mother's house and sitting down for a family dinner once with my siblings and significant others, about 8 of us in total. My brother, who's significantly younger than I am, was about 14 at the time. There was a silent moment, the kind where you can hear the sound of chewing, and my mother obviously wasn't comfortable with it, so she casually mentioned, "I walked in on him tickling his pickle last week." Chaos ensued. I had a female friend over, and there were about 3 of us sitting around on the couch drinking some beers. Then she drops the, "So, I lost a baby on Sunday" bomb. "Yeah, I didn't even know I was pregnant. Anyone want another beer?" I have an old friend who tends to drop these kinds of bombshells. She's had a hard life and hates to whine about it, but deep down she really needs to talk about these things sometimes. I think it's her way of keeping us updated about her life without feeling like she's a complainer. She's utterly not a complainer, which we tell her as much as possible, but she went through a lot of rough treatment as a kid, and is still dealing with a lot of it. When we were talking about one of my mum's uncles, she casually dropped the fact that he was a serial committer of the unspeakable act, of the worst kind. Jaws were dropped. Hungover at my college's cafeteria, eating breakfast and making obligatory small talk with a girl from Iowa. Somehow, the topic of crystal, the substance from Breaking Bad, came up. I know, right? What could go wrong with this topic? So I'm saying, yeah, it's a pretty rampant problem. I read a book about it that focused on a city in Iowa, actually. People just boost these big tanks of anhydrous ammonia from farmers. She says, "Oh yeah, my dad used to be a sheriff in Iowa." "Oh, cool." "Yeah, one time he tried to close the lid on a huge anhydrous ammonia tank that was leaking." "Oh, wow." "But he fell in when he was crossing the ladder." "Oh," with about a 5-second pause after that, before, "Is he all right?" "No, the acid ate him to the bone. He's dead." "Oh, well, prick." Another pause, and then I resumed my cereal. Yeah, I mean, what do you even say to continue that conversation? I think there's a much younger version of me that would be fascinated by the state of the body, but now that is not what I want to hear over breakfast. Or at all, really. My gosh. I used to work at a restaurant, and one day during pre-shift, we were casually talking and someone mentions choking someone else as a joking threat. My very hot manager says, "I like to be choked." Realizing what she said, she then stayed in her office for most of the day. I picked up a homeless guy on the interstate on the way back from Kansas City to St. Louis. He seemed really nice and had a lot of words of wisdom. He gave me some interesting insight on women and how to stay positive during the rough times. Later, he asked me if I lived in downtown St. Louis. No, I live in Clayton. I can drop you off around there or somewhere before." He responds, "Just don't drop me off downtown with all the N-words." And then, I swear on my life, he pulled out a big knife and showed me how he would stab an N-word if I dropped him off down there. At the next gas station, he went inside to take a leak, and I pretended to start filling up the car. Once he was out of sight, I popped the trunk, threw out both of his duffel bags on the ground, and peeled out of there. The whole escape probably took less than 8 seconds. One night I was talking to a friend of mine that I've known for years, and he drops the biggest what the frick bomb that I've ever heard. He told me that when he was 16, one morning he woke up and didn't remember anything. And by anything, I mean he wasn't even able to recognize his parents or girlfriend. The most shocking thing is that he never recovered the memory. He actually doesn't remember anything that happened to him before he was 16. I proceeded to talk with him for hours, asking questions like how it was to wake up one day and have a brand new life. It was messed up and extremely interesting as a conversation. He remembered all school notions, but forgot every person, every personal experience, and even how his own city looked like. He had to study a map of the city to get oriented to go around in places. I was at my friend's house on the last day of winter break, helping him pack his college stuff to go back to school. His mum walked through the doorway and looked at the piles of books, computer stuff, among other things, and had this expression of, "What the frick are you doing?" And after this long, awkward stare, she goes, "Oh, I guess no one told you.
Your dad lost his job and you're not going back to college this semester.
I was once having a drunken patio conversation with some buddies, and we were discussing stupid and annoying things. It was a random conversation about dumb crap, and we were having a laugh until one of my friends busts this out. Don't you guys hate it when you're taking a crap and it grazes the back of your ball bag? Everyone else had a long moment of silence. Another friend, after the moment of silence,
Dude, how big is your ball bag?
I recently caught up with someone I knew from my high school days, and we were catching up for dinner. After a few drinks, we get to talking about her husband. And that's when she drops the what the frick bomb.
Yeah, it's been hard for him and I, but once he gets out of jail, things will be better.
Jail? You never mentioned that. What's he in for?
Well, remember how I said he cheated on me once? Well, that's why he's in jail.
I stared at her.
He got a down-under kiss from a guy with Down syndrome, which is considered illegal in his state, because the guy was not considered mentally an adult.
I started mentally planning an escape route. I was hitchhiking and was picked up by a guy who had just caught his adopted 8-year-old son trying on his adopted infant son's diapers. He didn't know what to do or say, so he got in his van and just started driving. He had picked me up simply because he needed to tell someone. I mean, this isn't so bad. Kids do weird stuff. I'm sure the older one was just curious. Doing the deed with some girl out of pity, as she was going through AA. She casually mentions she'd think it were hot if I were to cut off her head and screw it. I really try hard to dismiss this and laugh it off. Then she goes,
No, I'm serious. I've done it with a dead body before. This guy I was riding OD'd on smack, and I just kept going. It was really hot.
I was at a Jack in the Box drive-thru, and the man and woman in the car in front of me were yelling at each other quite loudly, so I'd begun to eavesdrop. When he got up front to order, it went something like this. I need a number 4 combo, a number 3 combo, and a motherfricking divorce, and a strawberry milkshake. She started yelling, and I started laughing. I swear that if the clerk didn't ask if that dad wanted fries with that, he or she will be kicking themselves on their deathbed for the missed opportunity. I was driving along with my dad when I was about 6, in 1982. We were chatting about civil rights because one of my classmates was the very first black student at my elementary school. My dad was telling me about how the South is very racist, but most of the world isn't like Pennsylvania where he's from. He tells me about his friend in the service in Biloxi, LA, and how they were such good friends, did everything together, even went to ladies of the night together. But in Biloxi, the local lady wouldn't see his friend because he was black, so Dad said, "You're too ignorant even for a working girl," and refused to see her as well. So this whole time I was just sitting listening quietly, being a 6-year-old girl with 2 little blonde braids and a missing tooth. And Dad slowly turns and looks at me, and I said, "A working girl?" And Dad said, "Well, I was in the military, and that's just what you do in the military." On my first day of work at a shoe store, the manager walked around and introduced me to the other employees that came in that day. That was maybe about 2 other people. The last one of the night was an old, short woman named Joanne. As soon as she sees the manager, she walks up to her and tells us that her husband has found her toys and tried to throw them out. My manager says to me, Joanne collects Barbie dolls. And Joanne looks at her and says, "No, my other toys." Giving a coworker and her boyfriend a ride home, and she starts screaming at me to take a different exit off the highway because there's a police car on the off-ramp. Turns out they have a restraining order against each other because he was inappropriate with children, and she kicked the crap out of him for cheating on her. They both ended up in jail shortly after, him for the 13-year-old and her for stabbing him in the leg. Me and a friend were sitting around working on his Mazda when he mentioned that he only did it in the butt with his girlfriend because she had a cyst the size of a baseball in her hoo-ha and it grossed him out. Total non sequitur. I paused a minute and then just eventually said, "Your air cleaner is dirty." As a kid, I was playing along the shore of the Ohio River while visiting Dad's family. I found some neat sticks in the water and started collecting them when my cousin walked up. He was probably about 20 at the time, and he said, "I'm pretty sure those are human bones." Turns out they were. I was playing with a part of a murdered woman's femur. A few years back in college, I was playing Mario Kart Double Dash and drinking beer with a good friend of mine. I said, "Hey, pass me the turtle." He went, "Here you go, man." "Awesome. Take that, baby Mario." He then dropped in this gem. "Dude, I've got acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Long, shocked silence from me. Yeah.
When did you learn about it?
A few weeks ago. I've been meaning to tell you for a while now.
Wow. I'm not sure what to say.
Hey, your hiccups have gone.
What? Oh, you motherfricker.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My mum said, I want you to go to the shop for me and get this, this, and this. Oh, and by the way, Bluey, our dog, is dead. Don't forget the bread. Cue me bursting into tears. During my first week of the new job, my boss starts telling me and another employee about how he used to date a deaf girl, and that the reason they broke up was that he laughed when she screamed while they were doing the deed. Did you ever wonder if your mom gave your dad a down-under kiss just before she kissed you goodnight? Screw you, Uncle Tony. Screw you. I met this pretty cute girl at the beach a couple of summers ago. We started talking and playing volleyball. Everything seemed normal up until the part where they started describing their life.
Yeah, well, my boyfriend is in jail right now for stabbing someone, and that reminds me, you want to see my stab scar?
She shows me her stab scar and starts to tell me how she dropped out of school as a complete substance user.
You know, I kind of feel lonely without my boyfriend, and he doesn't need to know about anything else.
I walked out. I was at a random hookup I met through a buddy. She said, not long after the hookup,
So, how old are you?
My buddy said before I could say anything, he's 27. How old are you?
I'm 18, but don't worry, I've done the deed with someone who was 34 before. He's 40 now.
It was one of the most awkward moments of my life. It was also the last time I let my buddy hook me up with someone. Good fricking lord. Well, that's enough internet for the narrator for one day. Oh, wait a fricking second. He has to finish recording the second half of this script. Why? The things I do for you weirdos. My friend's girlfriend does this on the daily pretty much. We'll be talking to them about anything at all and she'll interject with, "One time, my mother bit me." Or,
"When I was 6, a strange man came in through my window. I hate graveyards because dead people talk to me."
It's kind of hard to salvage a conversation once it's taken that turn. I came home from high school one day and my parents told me that they had all of our family pets put down that day. 5 dogs and a cat. None of the animals were sick or hurt. In fact, one of them was only 2 years old. We had no problem affording their food and there were no legal issues. They just purely didn't want to take care of 5 85-pound bull mastiffs anymore. And it was my job to pick up their crap, not my parents'. From this experience, I learned that when you cry long enough, your tears become pink from blood caused by the irritation. I told my parents to go F themselves and lived in the basement for over a month. It was furnished. My mum left food for me at the top of the stairs, and somewhat unrelated, this is when I also taught myself how to code in assembly because I needed a distraction. A few months later, we went to a breeder and bought a West Highland White Terrier. He was a good dog, but I was always slightly concerned that they would randomly kill him too. My folks soon got divorced, and when they did, they didn't ask me who I wanted to live with, and didn't fight for custody of me, but they did fight like that couple on the War of the Roses over that fricking dog. So, at age 17, I moved out of the house. I had a job. I moved into my own apartment in a crappy neighborhood. To this day, I still don't forgive nor understand my parents, even though they passed away a long time ago. I was studying in the Dominican Republic and living in a very rural area. I passed my days sitting around talking to whoever. One day, I was in a town I frequented, and this guy I hadn't seen before starts talking to me. Within 5 minutes, he tells me this, totally straight-faced. "When I was little, I had a goat, and I used to play with the goat. But then I got too old, so I stopped playing with him. One day, I was sitting like this, and he had his knees apart, and the goat got mad that I wouldn't play with him. He charged, hit me between the legs, and took out my family jewels. Now I have none." I sat there, in shock, hoping that my Spanish was poor enough that I misunderstood. Sadly, an hour later, I hear the same story from his aunt, who's giggling while telling the story with the poor guy sitting right there. Not a conversation I was directly involved in, but there's still a high degree of what the frick. I was talking with some friends the other day, and one of them mentioned that while she was at work, her friends there brought up the topic of deepest, darkest secrets. One immediately volunteered the information that every time she goes to the bathroom, She sniffs her undies. Apparently, everyone just gaped awkwardly and the conversation quickly shifted to other topics. Seriously, if a topic like that ever comes up, don't be the first one to share. A girl I met for a blind date, which was already a disaster on so many levels, casually dropped this nugget as I was hurriedly bringing her home.
Yeah, so this one time a girl told people that my friend got her pregnant, and it was a lie. It ruined the kid's life. So the next time I saw her, I shivved her in the neck.
Huh. I accelerated the car slightly faster.
My dad left me on the freeway once for several hours, and now that I'm grown up, he steals my money and blames me for everything that goes wrong.
Yeah, that was about the third or fourth conversation I'd had with that guy. Way to drop dramatic family conversations into a conversation about cinnamon buns, my man. I was catching up with one of my ex-girlfriends who I hadn't seen in years. We parted on good terms, so it was just friends catching up. She was kind of weird in a monkey cheese ninjas pirates kind of way when I knew her, so this came as something of a shock. She went blah blah blah, and then I had my kids, but that was after I lost my leg. What, you lost a leg?
Yeah, we got in a shootout with some white supremacist group and I got hit in the leg. I didn't want to go to the hospital because the last doctor I saw was an N-word, and I think he's the reason I lost my eye. So I put it off and it finally got really infected, and then those dirty Indian doctors cut it off. Fricking dotheads.
Okay, and who was we again?
Oh,
and she names some other white supremacist group.
You know, I can get you in if you want. The racial cleansing is coming, and I'd hate for you to be on the wrong side of the race war. You're smart enough to be an officer, and we need someone good at planning, because the N-words…
I just said, So that's how I found out my ex-girlfriend was a one-legged, one-eyed white supremacist that gets into shootouts. Well, call me mindlessly optimistic, but the narrator is mostly just glad that by the sound of that story, most of those awful humans were too busy killing other white supremacists to devote much of their time to anything else. I was young and thought Red Lobster was an awesome restaurant. I had a bit of extra money just then, which was rare, so I asked this girl out. She was young, hot, in her early 20s or late teens, smoking body. We're sitting in the waiting area for our tables to be ready when this couple comes in with a toddler in a stroller. She smiles at the little boy and he smiles back at her. That's when she says,
"Oh, he's so cute. He looks just like my 2-year-old.
I'm rolling with this. Okay, she has a kid that she didn't mention. We'd talked a couple of times before, but never dated. So that's cool, I'm thinking. I can deal with this. Then she drops the bomb. Turning to me, she says,
"By the way, did I mention I have 5 kids?"
No. No, that didn't come up. Oh, I've got a couple for you. I was working at a grocery store. I was at the customer service desk. My boss was there. She was about 25-ish, maybe 20. We're talking about partying. I told her I like drinking bourbon to get real messed up. She tells me that, oh my god, she got so wasted off Jack one night, she was at a party and was basically blacking out, and she figures she gave just about every guy at the party a down-under kiss. What? I didn't know what to do. Did I hear that correctly? Holy crap. A couple of months later, I got the world's crappiest kiss of the same sort from the same girl. Practice, demonstrably, does not equal perfect. Even the handy was like some kind of sword-in-the-stone misadventure. Just terrible. Another time, I was talking to my roommate, an English guy. I was explaining the concept behind Toots and the Maytals' 54-46 song. He was a real kind English guy, and as I'm talking, he just sticks his finger into his nose, then that same finger into his mouth, and he sucks the frickin' thing dry better than my boss ever did. Both so different, both so similar, both so surreal.
"A guy once paid $300 to take a tinkle on me in some alley,"
said a late 30-something employee of mine. I may as well throw in one more. From the same office, I made the mistake of dating one of the female junior staffers. Our chain of command was entirely separate, so it should have been okay, but such things never work out as planned. Anywho, after flirting a bit at a bar, she asks me if she can spend the night at my place. She's 21, 98 pounds, and cute, so I consent. Get back, start making out. This is the first time we've ever made out, and 10 minutes or so in, she says, "I was a victim of the unspeakable act." What? I pull away.
"No, don't pull away. That's the worst thing you can do. I'm just telling you, it happened to me."
Thus began a 2.5-month relationship from hell. I was at a bachelor party talking to one of the exotic dancers. She says,
"Sure, I'll do the deed with the groom and even the best man, but after 3 or 4 guys, it gets kinda gross, you know?"
Her and I were on a first date, and upon her seeing a couple with a baby, she said,
I really want a baby.
"After you get married?"
No, I mean now. I don't need a husband. I just want a baby.
The same girl, later that night after being around some of my friends, told me that I must not like her because I was too nice to her around them. That if I really liked her, I would have put her down and made fun of her in front of them. There were a few too many issues going on there for me. Visiting my dad in Florida, he says to me, "I think the internet will be slow for the next hour. I'm downloading a naughty movie." What was the wildest thing to happen to you at your normal, regular job? Whew, mine would most definitely be what happened today at work. I work at Subway and it was pretty much dead at about 8 a.m. There was an older man who came in, about 6'4", 250 pounds, and he looked about 40 or so. He seemed very shady when I first said hi to him. He walked up to the counter and I asked, "What can I get you today, sir?" And he replied with, "I want a bag of money," in the most serious tone. Now, I've had people come in and joke by saying they want $1 million, and normally we just laugh about it. So I chuckled a little, but his facial expression didn't change. So I asked again, "What can I get you, sir?" And then he asked for the money again with that stern look. At this point, I'm getting extremely nervous because he seemed very serious. 30 seconds of silence went by that seemed like it took 5 minutes. He asked again for a bag of money and I said, "I'm sorry, but I can't do that, sir. Would you like something to eat?" He just stared at me a little longer, never changing his facial expressions. Finally, he decided he wanted a sandwich, but never lost the stern expression on his face. I still don't know whether he was actually being serious about wanting to rob me or if it was all a joke that he never let me know about. It scared the wee-wee out of me nonetheless. In short, a man tried to rob me and I made him a sandwich. I was working in a mall at a burger joint when I looked up and saw a guy coming out of the men's room holding a bloody butcher's knife. The man calmly walked through the food court and out of the mall exit as my manager and I both looked at each other, not believing what we saw. I swear 1 minute later, as we're trying to call security, 15 cops ran by with guns drawn. Turns out the guy had stabbed someone to death in the bathroom. The cops were there so fast because the same guy had violently attacked someone else the day before and escaped. He was recognized by a witness prior to going into the bathroom. In short, I saw the aftermath of a homicide while flipping burgers in a mall. I used to work in a dementia ward. I've been bitten, peed on, had things thrown at me, and attacked by a guy who was hallucinating. But the scariest thing was when one of the electric fireplaces caught fire and 2 of the men in the ward just locked their doors. The time between calling 911 and the firemen getting those 2 out was terrifying. We can only hope that this incident maybe encouraged the ward to perhaps update their doors to ones that couldn't trap the occupants into their own private furnaces during an event like this. But then again, these facilities tend to be underfunded, so who can say? I'm on disability right now due to my scariest work experience. I was a roofer by trade and I'd been working 7 days a week, 10 to 12-hour days, for 3 months. Working on a Sunday, I was finishing the last bit of work for a job at the peak of a roof when some kids came by. They asked if they could go inside the home to talk to the homeowner, and I said no very politely. They then pleaded to at least take pictures of the heritage home I was working on for their school project. Feeling sorry for them, I said, "Okay, fine, but no pictures of the construction, just be quick and careful." Right afterwards, they walked right below where I was working to take a picture. This is where all heck broke loose. Just then, my nail gun slipped and started sliding from the peak of the roof towards the kids. It was gaining speed quick and I was shouting for them to run, move, get the frick out of the way, etc. They didn't. They probably didn't even know what was about to drop on them, so I chased it. I fed myself tons of slack on my lifeline, chasing this thing just to grab it as it was about to fall off. I was able to toss the gun in a completely different direction, but with all the momentum I had, there was no stopping me from going over the edge. And so much slack on my lifeline, so there was nothing to keep me from hitting the ground. I fell 15 feet onto a staircase, shattering my left heel when I landed. The kids moved when they saw me in the air, that much I remember afterwards. This was the scariest thing that's happened to me. Many close calls and all sorts of jobs I've had, but in this particular situation, knowing this is going to hurt like heck is almost indescribable. Surgery went well and 4 months into recovery now. The internet helps with passing the time. I used to work as a production assistant on Dexter. On one fateful afternoon, we were shooting the fight sequence in the garage from episode 3 of season 4, the one where Dexter confronts the vandalizing neighbor. We had a large blackout tent rigged over this person's house to allow us to shoot a day for night, and I was stationed just outside. It was sunny and hot as heck that afternoon, so after a few takes of shouting and fighting, a request came over the radio that Michael C. Hall and J.C. McKenzie needed some water. I ran to the craft service truck, grabbed as many water bottles as I could, and booked it back to the house. As I stepped inside the tent from the bright sunlight, my vision went black. There was a lone practical light in the garage, meant to mimic Dexter's flashlight, which hardly provided sufficient illumination for my constricted pupils. I stumbled into the garage, arms full of water, doing my best to locate our actors. Despite the various crew members in the garage moving about, I was able to find JC rather quickly. He was right under the light talking to the director. So far, so good. I handed him a bottle and turned to find Michael. I spun around a couple of times, scanning the room, but no signs of MC Hall. Even as my eyes adjusted and shadows became clear, I couldn't find him. Then out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow move. As I turned around at that perfect moment, the dark passenger emerged. A figure clad in black, wearing a tattered ski mask, rose from the depths of whatever hell he came from and approached me. My spine froze. All the water bottles tumbled to the ground. For a brief moment, I felt the greatest fear I'd ever known. And then I realized it was Michael coming to grab a water. Man, did I look like a fool. He was very nice and apologetic about the whole thing and insisted he wasn't trying to scare me, but merely attempting to stay in character. We shared a good laugh, but seriously, he was wearing a ski mask and he's Dexter. Any man would crack. In short, Dexter Morgan scared me crapless in real life. I used to work with burrowing owls. We'd check nests with a long, flexible camera and a visor over our eyes. Well, one day I headed into this field, knelt down, put the visor on, check the nest. It took about 15 minutes. Then I stretch up and take the visor off. About 50 cows are in a circle 360 degrees around me, staring at me with their cold, dead eyes. I have no idea how I didn't feel them walking over. They started to get nervous and excited as I packed up my stuff, and parted so I could see one very angry bull at the back of the herd. I did my very best calm speed walk out of there. In short, I hate cows with a fiery passion. I worked at an electronic buyback store. One day a customer bought by a new 20-inch LCD monitor in the box. I made an offer and he was more than willing to sell me his product. We normally check all items to make sure they work before we pay out for them, so I decided I'd open the box and take a look inside. As soon as I open the box, over 100 cockroaches come crawling out of it and all over my counter. It took me a good couple of seconds to realize what exactly was coming out of the box, but it was both scary and gross. In short, someone opened a box full of cockroaches at my store. The monitor was in the box, and the customer seemed really shocked and embarrassed about the whole thing. Two people who had come in with just kind of walked away from him as soon as it happened. Can you imagine the conversation between the guy's friends? "Damn it, Jerry, this is why we never take him anywhere. For Pete's sake, Jerry, can we hang out at least once without you opening a box full of invertebrates?" Seriously though, this sounds like it might have closed down the store for a while. Next is a story that stretches our prompt of normal jobs to its limit. This was a volunteer job I had a while back. The giant Pacific octopus had refused food for a few days, so I was told to bring up a variety of stuff and see if I could get him to eat. I went up to his tank, which was in an isolated area, and grabbed some food and waved it around in front of his cave. He immediately shot out, grabbed the thing I was using to feed him, a plastic grabber that you could use to pick up trash, and then wound a couple of arms around my arm. He then latched onto a rock in his tank and yanked me so hard that I was doubled over the tank wall and unable to move. I'd played with octopuses before, and while they often held onto me with a tentacle, they weren't hard to remove, but I could not get this guy to release me. I struggled and managed to get one arm off, but he quickly twisted another around my arm. He was slowly pulling my hand closer to his mouth, which was really freaking me out. I kept shoving food at him. Fortunately, I'd bought a lot, and curling my hand around away from him as much as I could, but I was terrified that my hand was going to get chomped on with his beak. It wouldn't have killed me, but they are venomous, and octopus bites can be pretty nasty, even from small ones. His beak was pretty big. Eventually, he relaxed enough to where I could lift him out of the water a bit. He still had a couple of arms wrapped around my arm, and he didn't much care for that, so he let go and went back into his cave. It left me with about 55 bruises on my arm from the suckers on his tentacles. In short, Octopus grabbed me. I was worried he'd bite me. I spin a sign on the side of the road advertising ice cream for a local mum-and-pop store. An undercover cop pulled over a substance dealer right next to me, had him get out of the car, frisked him, and then confiscated a weapon he didn't have a license for. I awkwardly stood there advertising Orange Swirl Ice Cream. Did you take advantage?
Say, you guys look like you could use some delicious ice cream right now.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I work in vet med. One day we had a guy come in with his dog who insisted that his dog's problem, I think it was a minor laceration, was a much more critical thing than those belonging to the 5 or 6 animals already waiting to see a vet, and he demanded that he be allowed to budge the queue. When his initial tactics failed, he began shouting at the receptionist. One of the vet techs went up to try and calm him down, and the guy lost it. He started screaming that making him wait in line was illegal because it meant we were denying the animal his medical assistance, and that before calling the cops on us, he'd be back for personal vengeance. He assured us that he'd bring a piece and any other weapons he could lay his hands on. A lot of people were shaken up, so we called the cops, and they promised to keep an eye on the place for the next few days. We hoped that would be the end of it, but we were wrong. He was back the next day in a karate gi, exactly like the ones that little kids wear to competitions, brown belt and all. He stood in the doorway screaming obscenities while going through every cliché karate pose imaginable. The cops were there within 2 minutes, and that was the last we saw of Karate Man. The weapon threat was terrifying, the outfit, not so much. In short, man came in demanding to budge the line, threatened to come back in with a loaded weapon. Instead, came back in a karate outfit and was promptly arrested. When I worked as a waiter, I always remember a chunky steak knife slipping off a plate I was carrying and watching it fall, tip first, landing at the bottom of the stairs a couple of floors below. A split second after someone walked right in front of it. At a shooting range, I hate new shooters. They get so excited about shooting anywhere in the same zip code of the target that they whip around and say, "Did you see that?" and end up waving their piece at you. It's scary. I used to manage a pizza place, and one Friday around 11:30 a.m., a guy came in looking no different than any other of the smack or crystal heads in the neighborhood. We asked how his day was, and he said, "Fine," and then when he asked what he'd like to order, he said, "Give me the frickin' money." The cashier said, "What?" And he repeated, "Give me the fricking money." He put his hand inside his jacket and pointed something from the inside. Hindsight tells me it was probably just his hand and not a real piece, but it's not the kind of thing you want to take chances with. The cashier slowly moved to open the drawer and set it on the counter, and the guy grabbed what he could and ran out the door. He only ended up taking about $100, basically what the register had started at, since we'd only been open for 30 minutes. It was just a helpless feeling, though, being in charge and having a cashier potentially in danger like that. I worked at a 5-star rated haunted house for a good 4 years. It was seasonal. My job was to be an evil clown, and my role was to spontaneously appear to the groups that were walking through. Many scary things have happened to me. I've been punched, thrown to the floor, scratched, and have had people try to rip off my mask. I've seen people wet themselves and blow chunks all over the place. However, my all-time most scariest experience was when someone actually started dying in front of me. A woman walked through, passed out in front of me in the walkway, and after I tried helping her up, she began shaking and was trying to say something that I couldn't make out. The fire alarm is in the hall, so it was my first reaction to pull it. My manager ran right up to me and took over. Her eyes were already rolled to the back of her head by the time the ambulance got there, and they were able to save her. The next day, we were told she'd had an allergic reaction walking through the body bag room, which is a room full of elastic, and that's what she was allergic to. The body bag room soon turned into the asylum. Okay, if you're a puncher, stay the frick out of haunted houses. At best, you'll just hurt yourself, and at worst, you'll hurt someone else. In the middle, you'll break some expensive equipment. Yeah, you know what? This is true. The narrator has been guilty of victim-blaming the haunted house workers who get socked in these places. Really, why would you go into one of those things if this is the way you react? Do you want to get sued? I was working for a biotech company and an unknown substance spilled on me. I was freaking out for quite a while. It either gives you cancer or turns you into a superhero. Are you feeling lucky? I was thinking I didn't have any scary work experiences as a kid, but you've just reminded me of mine. I was working in a lab and we all had our powdered chemicals in a series of 7-foot-tall cabinets that slid out from the wall. Inside each one was 5 or 6 shelves with wire walls, so there were gaps. These held all the chemicals in place. One day I was going to put away one of the chemicals I'd been using and pulled out the unit, and this tiny vial of some chemical falls from the top shelf and smashes all over the place. At this point I'm thinking, frick, this thing must be poisonous if it comes in such a small container. So I tell everyone to clear out of the lab and I go to grab the head scientist. He just calmly tells me to go get my respirator and he'll come with me to check out what the chemical was. So we sweep it up into a bag and look at the chemical name, which was ridiculously long. Go to look it up in the MSDs and it turns out that it's the only chemical other than water that I've ever seen with all zeros for the health, flammability, reactivity diamond. I was working construction in the world's biggest oil refinery when there was an explosion maybe 50 yards from me and a big old fiery mushroom cloud shot into the air. We ducked behind some big concrete pipes, since you never expect only one explosion in a refinery, but nothing else happened. I don't consider it my scariest work experience by any means, but this is the one that seems to fit the question the best.
Wait, you mean this isn't your scariest? You have more? Do tell.
I've got so many I've written books about them, but specifically in that oil refinery we oftentimes work up high on the steel frame structures, supporting pipes and whatnot. Our team had a cherry picker on it, which is basically a mobile crane for picking up heavy stuff. We mostly placed stuff like valves and 30-foot-long pipes, maybe a foot or two in diameter, and welded them together. Once we had threaded a pipe via the cherry picker through a complex piping network a couple of stories down from where the tip of the crane boom was situated. The crane held the pipe while we maneuvered it. We were all under that heavy pipe at various times. We finally got it installed, and a bit later were walking to the next job on a refinery road with the cherry picker following us. Its boom was compressed as short as it could go and sticking out straight horizontally atop the mobile platform, with its end hook dangling maybe 10 feet behind the crew as we walked. We heard a thud and turned around to see the hook had fallen off the crane's tip, while it was carrying no load at all. If that had happened just a few minutes earlier while it held the pipe, me or others on the crew would surely have been killed, or at least parts of us crushed and permanently crippled or in need of amputation. To me, something like that was scarier than the fiery mushroom cloud. In that same place, invisible clouds of poison gas were a constant risk. There were little stations sprinkled about the place with sensors, sirens, and revolving lights, with signs saying that if the lights and sirens turned on, to run for your lives away from the station. That happened at least once, maybe more times. It's been over 30 years since then, so I'm hazy on the details. Invisible clouds of death are pretty scary, and to me, scarier than that explosion. I was at a client site supervising the installation of some new major 4000 amp 480 volt switchgear. There was a manufacturer rep there to help troubleshoot any problems we had during energizing the gear for the first time. So everything went smoothly at first, opened all the feeder breakers and then closed the main incoming 4000 amp breaker. So far, so good. As we slowly close the smaller feeder breakers one by one, we get to one that trips as soon as we try to close it. It was probably wired wrong. So the rep opens the main breaker to kill the power to gear. He opens the malfunctioning breaker and sticks his hand in there to check the wiring. The guy fricking yelps, jumps back, and his hard hat comes flying off his head. For a half second, I thought I just watched someone die. Turns out the idiot forgot to discharge the control wiring, so he only got a minor shock from a small charged capacitor. As the construction manager, I had to write up the incident and had a very serious conference call with his employer. I think he might have been fired. I worked in a call center for a large US telecommunications company in sales for 5 years. A woman called in one day, depressed and needing to talk to someone. Her husband had just died, she'd lost her only child a year prior, and she said she didn't want to be alive anymore. This lady had it planned out in great detail, which is why I was even more concerned. I highly suggested 911, because they're trained to handle this sort of thing. At the end of the day, she just needed someone to talk to. I ended up talking her out of self-deleting over the phone and giving her a few other resources I knew of. The Prevention Lifeline, NIMI, among a few others. You'd think working for a phone company in sales could get you some odd characters that call in and it makes for an entertaining story, but this particular incident certainly threw me for a loop. Regardless, at the end of the day, I'm glad this woman didn't take her own life. I work at a skate park. A few months ago, we had a guy try to slash, just ride up and nick the coping with his trucks, on the 7-foot quarter pipe that we call the tombstone. His trucks, the metal things that hold wheels to the skateboard deck, caught up, so he kicked out and wound up landing on the end of his board and shooting out. He smacked his head on the quarter pipe hard enough to break the helmet, and laid on the ground unconscious for a few seconds before going into a seizure. Had to call the ambulance and try to help him out. It took the ambulance 15 minutes to finally arrive. My boss went to visit him at the hospital and the doctor said if he hadn't been wearing his helmet, he'd be dead. So kids, that is why I'm the jerk about the helmet rule. In short, wear your damn helmet. What was the grossest or most ridiculous thing that happened to you at a restaurant? They said no when I asked for a glass of water, please. I went to a restaurant on my birthday. They found out and surprised me with a huge piece of cake. Then they added the cake to the receipt. Happy birthday! Here's your not free cake. As a server, I've done this once or twice, but luckily I caught it before. I have to ring it in for inventory reasons. You can't split it off the check on most serving OSs and comp it off for later. Just don't always mistake ignorance as malice, guys. I was a few bites into eating my salad, and there was one particularly interesting shiny piece of lettuce. I stabbed into it with my fork and pulled it out. This was no piece of lettuce. This was a wing and body of a huge dead grasshopper in the middle of my salad. I flung my fork across the room in a panic. I will never return. Went to a local Mexican restaurant, ordered our food, sat there for damn near 2 hours and it never came. I asked the waitress twice where our food was, and she apologized and said it was coming. It never came, so we got up and went to leave. 3 employees came up to us and said they were going to call the cops on us for dine and dashing. I told those dumb F-heads we never even got our food and walked past them. Haven't been back since, and it's been roughly 8 or 9 years. I told the guy, no shrimp. We started eating and I turned into an itchy, flaming hot Cheeto. The waiter tells me the cook doesn't do alterations. You could have said something to me before, idiot. The nozzle fell off the soda fountain and bug parts fell out into my cup. Roaches and other bugs in the soda fountain are actually a common problem if you don't clean it properly. So I told a worker and they just screwed the nozzle back on when they thought I wasn't looking. Who knows what else they weren't cleaning? Yeah, look behind you, customer. Yes, that's right. I cleaned all of the bugs out of the machine and got it working again in the half second where I had you looking at that street lamp. No further questions? Good. Who else wants soda? Was eating at a Chinese restaurant where you order rice by the bowl. From the angle I was sitting, I saw the waiters take half uneaten bowls of rice and dumping them back into the rice cooker. My uncle has a story like this. High school job, he was working as a busboy in a local Chinese restaurant. They stiff him on the tips one week and he says that if he doesn't get his fair share, he'll tell everyone about the rice. What's with the rice, you might ask? Well, he was instructed when bussing to take rice on the table, wipe it into the bowl of rice and bring it back into the kitchen for reuse. Table rice being reused. The infamous line is the manager saying to him, "You shut up now," giving him his tip money and him never going back. Had the police called on us for not paying for a meal we never received. A group of us had stopped in a local diner that we'd been to a number of times. Good food, adequate prices, that kind of thing. Took a bit to get a table, but not all that bad. Took 15 minutes to get a waitress to take our drink and food order, and another 25 minutes to get our drinks. After another 40 minutes with no food, they weren't that busy. We said screw it, left more than enough to cover the drinks, told the manager that we weren't going to wait any longer, and left. Fast forward to about 1 a.m. My friends get a knock on their door and it turns out it's the local police for the city the restaurant was in. They'd been given a report of a dine and dash from the manager, apparently getting my friend's plate number. The manager's contention was that because we'd ordered and they were in the process of cooking the food, that we were required to pay for it. After explaining the situation, the police decided to side with us, but decided that we should not return to the restaurant, and we took them up on the suggestion. We found out several months later that the diner had shifted to a pay-at-order method, even though they weren't a fast food place. They ended up closing shortly thereafter. There was a small fly, a fruit fly I think, in my fried egg. It was all fried and crispy. I wasn't even that bothered. I'm not a confrontational person, and I didn't even want a whole new meal. I just wanted a new egg. The waitress came back from the kitchen and said the chef was insisting it was a bit of herb that he uses in his cooking. You could see the legs and wings. They were so insistent that I could see it wasn't worth arguing. They were a new business as well, so you would have thought they'd want to establish a customer base. The Gaslight Bar and Grill. My wife had an allergic reaction, clearly mentioning she was allergic to eggs, and they said that a creamy substance on the side was cream cheese, but it was mayo. 15 minutes later, she was intubated in the emergency room. Nope, never going there again. Anyway, the restaurant closed last year. The little brownie mix package was baked into the goddamn brownie. Oh, that? It's just a little extra flavoring. Really helps improve the texture. All of our customers love it. They lost a lawsuit over stealing a server's tips. Best pancakes, stuffed French toast, and breakfast skillets of my life, but I couldn't do it after that. We went to the Old Country buffet a long time ago, and my dad got a hot dog that turned out to be moldy. We haven't gone back. I worked at this place for one day. It was a deli-type place. I had 5 years kitchen experience and needed the work in my small town. Within 5 minutes, I was questioning their sanitary disposition with unregulated temperatures, improper disposal methods, and general disregard for cleanliness. After a half hour, I told myself I needed the money, I could look past it, and do my best to make improvements over time. Then came the French fry that broke the camel's back. Their fryer, they dumped a basket of fries in it, but when it came out, it had a brown film or sludge over the delicious, crispy fried potato product. I asked if they were going to serve that to the customer. They said, yes, it's the gravy. After further questioning, I found out they inherited the property and the oil hasn't been changed in 7 years. After 45 minutes of working there, I quit and called the health inspector, and I never looked back. Butter chicken had no chicken. I called the manager, and the guy seemed like this was a regular thing. I told them we're not paying, and they didn't give a frick and said, okay. I used to go to a local Mexican restaurant so much that I knew the workers by name, and they knew me by name. I went with my friend, and she was being super flirty and made a deal with the waiter that she'd go on a date for a free drink. When we left, she said she wasn't going on that date. I can never return to that restaurant. Local breakfast place in my hometown that I went to as a kid. Ordered a Belgian waffle and it comes out dark brown and crunchy. I complained that it was burnt and they sent it back to make a new one. About 5 minutes later, they returned with a new waffle. Except it wasn't new, it had bite marks, right where I'd bitten it. And hey, the section I bit out had butter on it. They'd walked in the back, turned the waffle over, and thought no one would notice. When this took place, I was about 7. I refused to go back to the restaurant for well over a decade, but they remained open. It's a small town and a local business, so maybe that's not surprising. About a year ago, I went back in and was pleasantly surprised by my experience. My waitress was also the new manager, and she was sweet as could be. Had no issues with the service, and when my food came out, it was delicious. I still only ordered the pancakes, though. Yeah, I mean, if the restaurant lasts that long, it's a fair assumption that the same people who had committed the offense had probably moved on, and that it wasn't so consistently awful that all its customers had abandoned it. Good save, breakfast place. Super hipster pancake place in Portland. Long waits for brunch, was dragged there on a date. 2-hour wait for frickin' pancakes, and when we finally got in, after getting a single mimosa, the power goes down. Their response? Make everyone pay for what they'd ordered, not even received, and give jump-the-line tickets to people still in line, but nothing but a hearty frick you to the diners. Never again. During college, I caught the Chinese food restaurant's employees sneezing in the food. They saw me see it from far away and walked into the back. I told everyone that I knew. Went to a local Mexican place and got a burrito. I took a bite in and found glass. Gracias. found a bunch of eaten chicken wing bones in my appetizer basket. They just dropped a new piece of paper over them and filled it up with onion rings. I pointed it out to the manager, then declined to get my appetizer for free and walked out. They bring out food quickly after I order it. It's lukewarm. I send it back, I hear the microwave ding, they bring it out, still cold in the center. They put their finger in the center to verify, then they take it out back again. Ding! May I have a to-go box? It was a restaurant in Waikiki the last night of our vacation. The place was crawling with bedbugs. We didn't know they were bedbugs at the time and didn't actually figure out until we were back home and the telltale bites developed. We had to call our hotel and tell them we may have introduced bedbugs to the room. They freaked out, but hey, it was their employee who recommended the place. We had to empty out the freezer to deep freeze everything we couldn't boil or leave roasting in a black garbage bag on a sunny patio for weeks. We had to put special covers on our mattresses and vacuum and scrub every surface every day. Our house wasn't infested, but it was over a month before we could relax. When I called the restaurant, the manager said, "Oh yeah, we have a terrible bedbug infestation. We have an exterminator come once a month, but every place in Waikiki has bedbugs. Everyone knows that. You should read the local newspaper." When we wrote about it on TripAdvisor, the same manager called us to ask us to remove the review. In return, we'd get dinner on the house if we ever returned. Not only am I never going back to that restaurant, I'm not even going back to Oahu. Frick you, Lulus. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Kenosha Steakhouse, Breckenridge, Colorado. I was living and working over at Keystone for my first of 4+ years in Summit County. I had some friends visiting me from out of state. We went into Breckenridge for a night of shenanigans. We went to the saloon and bar place on Main Street in Breck called Kenosha Steakhouse. Waitress didn't show up for 15 minutes. Then it took another 25 minutes for the 3 beers we'd ordered to come in. We'd ordered food at the same time, and those came out 20 minutes after the beers, so 45 minutes after ordering. From sitting down to having food on our table, it was 1 hour. The food was bland and barely warm. The waitress never showed up again to offer us a refill. We had to flag another server to get our check. They then refused to split a 3-top check, despite never stating as much before or showing that anywhere. On the way out, I went to complain to a manager, and some staff member faked being management, and another staffer told us it won't make any difference to me when I pointed out that I worked in hospitality in county and this experience was beyond unacceptable. The snide comment from the waiter about it not making any difference struck a deep nerve. I checked in thousands of guests from that point until I stopped working in hospitality. Every one of those guests I explicitly told not to go to that restaurant. On top of that, I moved to Breck and lived there for 2 years. I'd approach people on the street looking at the outdoor menu outside of Kenosha and dissuade them away. I also was working in a sales position intermittently during this time, and I told the same story to all guests I interacted with. But I didn't make any difference, right? Mexican restaurant I'd never been to before. Me and 2 friends go in, wait for a while by the door while being stared at by the staff, and eventually we seat ourselves. A boy no older than 10 years old greets us after a minute and I asked for a water. He said they didn't have water. They didn't have water. They didn't have water? They didn't have water? A cockroach ran out of the basket of tortilla chips and the waitress's response was, "Oh, that happens sometimes." A family-owned restaurant didn't honor a 3-week in advance reservation for Valentine's Day, but instead overbooked and didn't seat us until an hour later. Then proceeded to give us silverware and ask us for drinks 20 minutes after that. We just said not to bother and left. We were completely ignored. It was a small, family-owned Mexican restaurant that was extremely popular. We'd been there many times. We were the only people sitting in one waitress's section. We watched her as she stood there talking to the busboys and cooks in plain view of our table. We had to walk up to her to ask her to take our order and go up again to ask for another margarita. We then had to go up and ask for the check. It was the only time I didn't leave a tip somewhere. I have no idea what we did to her. The other waitress in a different section was actually doing her job and she had a full section. The only thing I can think of is it was the end of her shift and she didn't care. I still remember clearly when I went to a restaurant called Bamboo House. I was just enjoying my pho when I felt something hard on my tongue. I pulled it out of my mouth, and it was a bitten-off toenail. Never effed with that place again. They literally asked if I wanted another bowl. Which? You think I want another bowl after that? But this one might not have any toenail in it. Cripes, that is seriously gross. In what universe doesn't the manager just go in and scream at the chef when that happens? Actually, no, I get it. Chefs are scary. Welcome, one and all, to my Valentine's nightmare. My fiancé and I went to a popular local-owned seafood restaurant. Because we knew it would get packed, we arrived pretty early. I ordered a rum and coke, and my significant other ordered a Sprite because he was driving. The waitress brought me a rum and coke, but brought him a 7 and 7. We explained the mistake to the waitress, and I told her not to worry about it, and I'd drink the 7 and 7 and to please bring a Sprite. When she brought our meals, she brought me the wrong meal. She apologized and I assumed went to reorder my meal. I ordered crab legs. 20 minutes go by and my fiancé is finished eating and we're just waiting. The waitress never returned to our table. She didn't come by to refill his Sprite or tell me my food was on its way. Nothing. I finally decided this is just crazy and I flagged her down and asked her to please cancel my order and get us our check. I explained that we'd pay for all the drinks and the food that my fiancé ate, but I wasn't paying for the food that I ordered and never received. About 5 minutes later, she comes back to our table crying her eyes out. I mean, really sobbing. Her manager told us that she had to pay for our meal. My fiancé told her, "No, we'll pay for what we ate and drank. Please go get your manager." The manager came to our table with my food. At this point, I'm not eating. I just want to get out of there. I decline the food and ask for our bill. The manager storms off with the plate of food. He comes back. We're on the second floor of the restaurant, and he just stands on the other side of the room. The waitress is waiting on customers but still sniffling. My fiancé walks up to the manager and asks again for our bill. Tells him that we don't want the waitress to pay for our food and drinks and that we don't have any problem paying for what we had. The manager then starts loudly yelling at him. Mind you, this is in an area with many other diners. He's telling him that we planned this and that we did this on purpose to get a free meal out of them. My significant other is a big dude and doesn't take crap from anyone, but I was proud of him. He just turned around and we left. I'm sure that poor waitress ended up paying for our food and drinks, but they wouldn't give us the bill. I ended up eating peanut butter and jelly for dinner that night. I've had many things go wrong in restaurants, but none of them have stopped me from going to a place again. I have very low standards. I was at a macaroni grill. I felt something on my leg, then swatted at my jeans. Went to the bathroom and found nothing, but returned and saw there was a crushed roach under the table. Basically, I crushed it against my jeans and it had fallen off out of the jeans afterwards. I told the waitress who just offered a free dessert. Really wasn't angry, and we just joked about it, but afterwards, I did avoid that location. It was our favorite bar. We used to live down the road from it. We had our first date there and knew every employee, even the cooks in the back. We moved about 25 minutes away. We got engaged and needed to save money. We went for the first time in months. The menu had changed drastically. The management changed. Almost none of the servers recognized us. Most of the staff had left. We tried to give it a go, but the food was awful. They'd even changed cooks. We realized what we had was gone. Steak and Shake south of Houston. Went in and the staff didn't really seem to give a crap, but whatever. Ordered a Royale and it was delicious. Until I noticed the mold on the bottom of the bun. Not just a little either. I'm talking multicolored, nasty, moldy bun. On a burger that I'd already eaten like a third of. I showed it to the waiter who seemed pretty blazed and he just said, "Oh, I'm sorry man. Do you want something else?" I asked for the manager who didn't charge us and gave us a coupon for a free meal that we'd never used. I was blowing chunks in the parking lot before we left. I booked a table for 7 at an Indian restaurant. I had this confirmed by email, and the manager even called me a few hours before to remind me and let me know that they were looking forward to hosting us. I arrived at the restaurant and the manager was nowhere to be seen. The staff tell me there's no booking and even suggest I've booked over the road. I show them my phone log and they say it's definitely not their phone number. They begin trying to usher us towards the exit. I start thinking I've messed up big time and freak out. I've screwed up organizing a get-together for my best friend who's moving away. I decide to call the number that had phoned me earlier. Then the restaurant telephone right next to us starts to ring. The guy who said I had no booking picks up. He notices it's me, but decides to pretend he thinks I'm another customer calling in. It feels like a scene from Fawlty Towers. I'm on the phone to him and standing right next to him. Hello, I'm standing right beside you. I have a booking. I've got an email confirmation and you also called me today. You just pretended this wasn't your number and now you've answered it right in front of me. I'm pretty sure I'm not booked over the road, but I kind of wish that I was now. There was hair baked into my quesadilla. Not a hair, an amount of hair. Like, enough that I was concerned for the health of the chef. My wife is celiac, so a really intense, real gluten allergy. We had a gluten-free menu. It lists chicken and waffles. She orders it, takes a few bites, comments that it's the best gluten-free waffle she's ever tasted, then starts to feel sick, asks the waiter, "Oh, the waffle isn't gluten-free, just the chicken." When I was 3, my parents and I were at Pizza Hut, and when the waiter brought out drinks, he spilled them all over me. All 3 of us had gotten soda, so I was sticky. This in itself wasn't too bad, but when my parents got the check, we realized that they'd charged us for 2 sets of drinks, one of which was the ones that were spilled on me. When my dad asked the waiter about this, he said it was only fair. This is the only time I've heard about my dad not tipping. Skeptics. What insane conspiracies do you actually believe in? That anti-dandruff shampoos temporarily get rid of dandruff, but somehow dry your scalp out even more over time, so that it worsens your dandruff when you stop using it. So I thought that I had dandruff for years and always used Head & Shoulders or other related dandruff shampoos, and nothing really worked. One day my friend says, "Are you sure you have dandruff and not just dry scalp?" I thought they were the same thing, so I did some Googling. Turns out if you have dry scalp, dandruff shampoos make it worse. Just to check, I stopped using dandruff shampoos and started doing things to treat dry scalp, and my, quote, dandruff went away, after like 20 years of me dealing with it. Yep, I could have just gone to a dermatologist, but then I wouldn't have been able to put this comment on the internet. Dandruff and dry scalp sufferers unite. For the few people asking what I did for the dry scalp, the biggest thing I did was brush my hair more often, which loosened up the flakes. After 2 decades of struggling with this is what fixed it, so you can imagine my irritated happiness. Since I do have really thick hair, using a hairdryer helps a lot versus air drying. I still have some problems with weather changes, but it's not an everyday issue like it was. I stay away from all medicated shampoos and tea tree oils now. Now let's find a way to fix my acne. I believe Area 51 was a base for building and testing new top-secret aircraft. When the government denied its obvious existence, it took on a lot of interest from the conspiracy theorist world. The US government now works to maintain the mystery around the base in order to maintain the focus of the conspiracy theorist community and distract them from the actual things going on elsewhere. I don't think many people would contend that Area 51 is just an Air Force base now, and the most secret thing that goes on there is testing prototype aircraft. It almost certainly benefits them that people attribute it to alien research, as it means they aren't looking harder at what they're actively working on, and thus, people can't develop counters to their new tools of warfare. Dr. Kelly, a WMD weapons expert, was murdered by the British government in 2003. I remember this happening. It was weird. The guy was demonized in most of the press for spreading misinformation, and then his self-deletion was all over the papers, and the next day a couple of reports of mysterious men in suits disappearing from the scene, and then those witnesses were hurriedly silenced. A very public inquiry was launched which ruled the death as a self-deletion, at the expense of an inquest. Afterwards, the medical records were sealed at the time, although the results of the inquest were later released in 2010. Medical experts have since requested whether he removed himself, and of course, we now know that he was right to question the 45-minute launch of WMDs in Iraq. I'm convinced in 50 years we'll discover he died for nothing, no one will care, but at the time, his death squashed any powerful voices claiming Blair was wrong to push ahead with the Iraq War. I think that aliens know we're here and potentially visit the Earth from time to time. Now, while there's definitely life on other planets, just think statistically about how many other planets there are, it's got to happen more than once, right? I did used to seriously doubt that aliens ever came here, it just doesn't make much sense. The main problem I saw is that there would be no logical motive for aliens to visit us. but not want any direct contact. That's like going to a party, but sneaking around the outside rather than going in. A while ago, however, someone else on the internet pointed out that there are tribes deep in the Amazon rainforest who've never contacted the outside world. In fact, it's actually illegal to visit them. They're being preserved and observed, but primarily preserved. What that guy on the internet was suggesting was that there may be some kind of advanced alien civilization who knows we're here, but avoiding direct contact in order to preserve us and our way of life. Sure, we're talking pretty unimaginable technologies here, but then, if you brought one of those Amazonian tribesmen out and told him that we can get to the moon and talk with anyone we want in the world, that would just blow his mind. In short, aliens know we're here, but they avoid contact in order to preserve us. That Harvey Milk's death was more than about his being gay. Harvey Milk and Mayor George Moscone were part of the more left-wing faction in San Francisco politics that wanted, among other things, to figure out a solution for the rent increases that were pricing long-time residents out of the city. Other members of the Board of Supervisors, like Dianne Feinstein, were quite liberal by national standards but were firmly in the pocket of real estate developers. When Dan White quit his post as a member of the board, it meant that they lost one of their most pro-business members, and since Moscone was going to get to appoint White's successor, they'd end up with someone who was really strong on the anti-gentrification side instead. Since the board was already closely split, this would represent a critical realignment in city politics. The real estate developers and the police association had meetings where they tried to offer Dan White various things if he'd try to get his old job back. There were former police officers who were among Dan White's strongest supporters. So he agreed, and Moscone appeared to be considering it initially, but Milk went to Moscone and jammed this idea up. After this, White shot Milk and Moscone. Dianne Feinstein replaced Moscone as mayor and used that position to appoint more moderates to the empty seats on the council. The chief of police, who was well liked by the gay community but roundly hated by his own rank and file, was fired. Dan White was given 7 years in jail for a double murder and served 5, and today a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco rents for $3,500 a month. There isn't enough evidence to really accuse anyone of anything, yet it's breathtaking how all of these big power players seemed to get what they wanted because of the actions of a lone nut. I'm a fan of the lost cosmonaut theory. The idea that the Russians were cutting a lot of corners to be the first in space, so Yuri Gagarin wasn't the first man in space, just the first to make it back alive. That the BBC brought on Chris Evans to host the new Top Gear knowing full well that everyone would hate him. Then, once they replaced him with someone better for the next season, people would compare the new host to Chris Evans and not Jeremy Clarkson, so people would like the new Top Gear more. This is similar to the new Coke conspiracy theory, the theory that Coca-Cola wanted to change from sugar to corn syrup to increase profits, but they knew that there was a slight taste difference that people would notice and reject. To hide this, they introduced an even more different formula, New Coke, and while it entered the market, they were able to flush the original sugar-based Coke from the pipeline. People rejected New Coke as they expected, which gave them the opportunity to, quote, listen to their customers and reintroduce Coke Classic, now made with corn syrup. Customers rejoiced at having their original flavor back, not noticing it was now slightly different than before. Coca-Cola also got a large amount of publicity out of all of this and helped cement affinity for the brand. Regardless of whether this is true, it is the kind of thing a megacorporation would do. However, I feel like there's bottles of old Coke left in the world, and if we wanted to prove it, we probably could have by now. Hot dogs are sold in packs of 12. Hot dog buns are sold in packs of 8. If you want enough hot dogs to go with buns, and vice versa, you have to buy 2 packs of hot dogs and 3 packs of buns. Otherwise, you're left with some useless leftovers. I'm on to you, hot dog mafia. And yeah, sure, different regions, brands, and different countries package them in different quantities. In various places, you might find them in packages of 5, 6, 8, 10, or 12, or any or all of those. Doesn't mean the entire world gets them packaged the same way. That Smash Bros. Conspiracy where they already have the characters they want for the new game picked out, but they let us vote to make us think we have some power. Women's pants don't have usable pockets, so they have to buy purses. I have a few female friends that buy men's skinny jeans just to have the pockets. That for the conspiracy theories proven to be true, MKUltra comes to mind, we've likely only seen the tip of the iceberg. It's very possible that we shot down Flight 93. I was in the Air Force from 08 to 14 as a crew chef. During, I met multiple people that were stationed at Langley AFB in Washington, D.C. that said we definitely scrambled F-16s that day from the base, and some of them came back with less armament than they took off with. It's horrible to think that we'd do this, but it does make sense. 2 planes have hit the towers, 1 on the Pentagon, and now that you get a plane that's not responding to any callbacks, what do you do? Again, it's horrible, but in my opinion, that plane has got to come down. If all this is true though, the skeptic in me is surprised at the length at which the government has gone with the stories of cell phone calls, heroics, the movie, and other things. And yeah, I understand Langley is not geographically located in DC, but given its vicinity and importance, the district is commonly used as its reference point. Langley is commonly referred to as the tip of the sphere, and most of the Air Force's central intelligence is based there. As I said, I am, for the most part, a skeptic of the possibility of this. This is what I believe the question called for, and I'm just saying that out of all of the conspiracies out there, this is one I'm not as quick to dismiss, due to personal references that I've encountered. While I do currently own tinfoil in my household, none of it is in any form of headgear. And I'd like to confirm I've had no run-ins with any secret government agencies as of yet. I'll keep you posted. My current level of concern may rise given how this Trump thing plays out. Lip balm temporarily makes your lips feel moisturized and soft, but dries out your lips over time, so you end up buying more. Keep hydrated, everyone. It's a great way to prevent chapped lips. 2 liters a day is the recommended amount, but varies based on age, weight, activity levels, and other things. That Michael Jordan was suspended by the NBA for gambling, and they covered it up as his baseball era. The NBA had too much to lose from tarnishing Jordan's name. The RNG in XCOM is rigged. I know they're rookies, but what the frick was the chance of missing 4 60% shots in a row? I bet my left testy that any shot where the chance is displayed as 85% may as well be 10%. I don't care what you say, you can't convince me otherwise. And don't get me started on the dodgeball crap, like the game needed more ways to make me want to punch a puppy. Guys, I don't want to sound like I'm wearing a tinfoil hat or anything, but I think O.J. Simpson killed those people. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I used to think that all prisons were filled with sociopaths and murderers, until I started interning at one and seeing it from the inside. There's definitely something shady going on with corporations and the free labor. I'm totally convinced our criminal justice system was designed to keep slavery around. Call me paranoid, but I'm a subscriber to the idea that we're being spied on. At any moment, the NSA can tap into my camera and microphone on my phone and observe me. Not that they'd want to observe me, but I think they can do it to anyone. I don't know if this is as much a conspiracy theory as much as an unspoken fact of life these days. I mean, we know that we're being spied on all the time, and our data is being used to inform corporations, as seen in our targeted ads and such on social media. If you do want to go further than that, though, most of the people the narrator knows who work in IT do put tape over their webcams, and they are much more informed about this sort of thing than we are. Honestly, I'm normally not one for these, but I can't help but believe, when faced with the overwhelming evidence, that King of the Hill was cancelled due to Dale's theories being uncomfortably close to the truth. I don't necessarily trust our 2 cats. When I walk into the room, they look at me, separate, and go their own ways. Technology breaking just after its warranty expires isn't a conspiracy. We're told to design it that way. You put heat-generating components near heat-sensitive components so they degrade and break. The trick is to design them close enough to break, but far away enough to not break too soon. This is something that I've immersed myself in over the past 5 years of my life. I consider myself a skeptic, and consider the average conspiracy theorist to be the foremost discreditor of legitimate conspiracy theories. I've come to realize that at the source of so many wild conspiracy theories, there lies a grain of truth. which was drowned out by rampant speculation and paranoia. You have to understand that wherever conspiracy theories are discussed, the mentally ill and the paranoid will flock there like moths to a flame. They drown out any rational discussion. And some of these things you can't mention without triggering that automatic reaction of, "Oh, you're one of those people." At that point, people stop listening to you with an open mind. Any conspiracy theorist worth his salt knows to avoid certain trigger words. If you want some real conspiracies, they're surprisingly out in the open. The MK Ultra sub-projects sound like a paranoid fantasy, but I'd be happy to share thousands of FOIA documents on the subject. Massive, elite rings of people doing illicit activities, often involving inappropriate behavior with minors, that are a reality as well. Just look at the recent investigations in the UK surrounding the Westminster Ring or the Detroit affair in Belgium. Hell, look at Jeffrey E.'s Island, which was set up for blackmail based on the bedroom activities of elites. If you really want to go down the rabbit hole, search for a US Customs report on a cult called The Finders, and the subsequent news reports. I find that it's sometimes better to simply give someone a lead and let them come to their own conclusions. Have you ever heard of Adnan Khashoggi? Once you start searching names like his, it's hard to deny that there's a class of protected criminals operating on a supranational level. The conclusion I've come to is that real conspiracies are incredibly convoluted and, above all, boring. To have a good foundation, you have to investigate a few major scandals and how they overlap. Iran-Contra, Bank of Credit and Commerce International, and the savings and loan scandal. I could include a few others as well, but investigating those scandals will familiarize you with the major players. Once you do that, then you start seeing these obscure criminals and power players in other places that you wouldn't expect to. That's when crap starts to get weird and most people become confused, overwhelmed, and paranoid. Then they become the very people who can only ramble on and on incoherently, unable to explain what they know, and ironically discrediting the very conspiracies that they sought to expose. What happens after a certain point is that the plethora of front companies and power players gets jumbled up in your mind. You can't adequately articulate it or envision the exact structure, so unless you're willing to actually map those things out with a character web, then you just wind up passing on little tidbits of information without context. So as information passes from researcher to researcher, it gets more confusing, and there are less references and evidence offered. This leads newcomers to believe that there isn't actually any proof, but in reality it's just because it's one of the most difficult topics to articulate, especially the deeper you go. Some people do actually map out the connections, and the one guy who came closest to naming the usual suspects was an artist named Mark Lombardi. I highly recommend checking out his Wikipedia page. He wound up self-deleting after painstakingly mapping out connections that would become relevant in later scandals. And it's no wonder, because this stuff takes a psychological toll. After a certain point, most researchers simply decide, I can't do this anymore. I know something evil is going on, but for my mental health, I need to step back. I'll tell you one thing, it's an alienating and surreal feeling to be armed with this knowledge. I remember back when the Panama Papers story broke and we learned that Mossack was the son of a former Third Reich official who wound up working for the CIA in Cuba. I thought to myself, yeah, this fits the bill. I bet Adnan Khashoggi and Farhad Azima will turn up in there somewhere. And sure enough, subsequent news reports showed that Khashoggi and Azima were implicated. Now, how is it that I, a humble Google armchair warrior, can see all of this going on, but it still remains beneath the surface? Conspiracies suppress themselves at this point. It's much easier to laugh at them than sift through all of the paranoia and convoluted nonsense. Much easier not to put yourself through the living hell that Mark Lombardi did. Much easier to take the safer road and not be perceived as one of those people. Why do I have to anonymously write into a YouTube channel to even mention these things that are easily verifiable with mainstream media reports? I have to lead a virtual double life because my friends and family would view me differently if they knew the things that I believed. It doesn't matter that I could prove it to them with sources that they deemed credible. They just wouldn't give me the time and willingness. In short, many horrific conspiracies are real, but they automatically suppress themselves. No shills required. I wonder if just narrating these is going to set off a chain of events that turns the narrator into the kind of person who researches these things exhaustively in his own time. I'm not saying that I'm convinced one way or the other, just that when people swear the evidence is there, it's almost a challenge for me to look them up myself. If it makes a difference to you, dear viewers, the narrator would like to present the material here just as an overview of these theories, rather than come off as a proponent of any of them. There is absolutely no reason for contact cases to be as large as they are, except to increase the amount of saline solution needed to cover up your contact lenses. Big saline companies are out to get us. Far more advanced technology is available, but for the sake of certain companies' profits, we don't get certain technologies. For example, we had a prototype electric car capable of a 250-mile range back in 1914. You're telling me 66 years later and it's not a normal part of society? The dependency on oil is stifling our advancements as a society. Greed is holding us back. Beyoncé was never really pregnant with Blue Ivy in 2011. Beyoncé is highly controlling of her public image and is more than capable of pulling this off. Beyoncé's pregnant belly inflated and deflated throughout her pregnancy. In one interview, her pregnant belly appears to collapse. In interviews, she'd mess up and say inconsistent due dates, not messing up by a few days but by months. Despite being one of the most talked about celebrity pregnancies, there's no leaked information about the birth. During the birth, we know Beyoncé and Jay-Z sectioned off an entire wing of Lenox Hill Hospital. I can see wanting some privacy, but what were they hiding that they had to shut off a whole wing? The theory is that Beyoncé's career is highly dependent on her body and keeping it tight. Or they might have fertility issues. J paid a surrogate to carry their baby, then shut down a whole wing of the hospital, so no one would know Beyoncé never gave birth and wouldn't see the surrogate. No photos were released of Bey shortly after the pregnancy because people would have been able to tell she hadn't just been pregnant. Debbie Wasserman Schultz was a key part of Clinton's 2008 campaign. Tim Kaine was the chairman of the DNC before Schultz. Clinton offered Kaine the position of vice president if he stepped down and recommended Schultz as his replacement. He stepped down. Schultz became the chairman of the DNC after a short period. She proceeded to do everything in her power to rig the elections so that Clinton got the nomination. Clinton's VP nominee is Tim Kaine. Soccer will never be popular in America because the broadcasters have no desire to create demand for it. It's essentially 45 minutes of commercial-free programming. Who wants that? Success of football and baseball is directly linked to their built-in ability to have breaks for commercials. Air those games all the time. The advertisers have chosen America's interest, and it's impossible to change without broadcast support. Similar to why no one wants to promote hockey in America, because it doesn't really lend itself to broadcast advertising. I believe the government created Throwback Thursday so they could get all of our old pictures on their databases. Mainstream media only reports things for ratings, while they pass up on actual world news that could affect us, and they intentionally misinform people to make the situation and public outcry worse. This is kind of answering the opposite question, but I feel the need to share. There are people who are proponents of the September 11th buildings being brought down by controlled demolition, saying that the videos look the same as one. I think they're looking at it the wrong way. Why does controlled demolition look the way it does? Because engineers plan explosives to take advantage of the building's natural weak points. If a large building was to actually fall on its own, it would look the same because they both fail at the same weak points. There are so many conspiracies about that, but I've never seen one actually address that issue. It's not that the buildings look like controlled demolition, but that controlled demolition looks like an actual building collapse. We just haven't had any other skyscrapers fall naturally to compare. What did you say to an annoying customer to shut them the hell up? One of my favorite stories from my brief time in customer service was when a man who called up the night after a major hurricane was screaming that his service didn't work, that he'd complained multiple times and this was the last straw. Clearly, our service sucked, and it was our fault his cable was out. He kept cutting me off and calling me rude names when I finally just interjected, "Sir, your cable isn't out because of an issue with your service. Your cable is out because a tree branch fell across the cable line." "What's that? How do I know?" "Because you live at number 78 and I live at number 75. I saw the branch fall. I'm the one who went out in the rain last night to get the branch out of the street. In fact, I know you know it's a branch because I could see you looking out your window at me moving the branch that fell on your property. Not only that, but when I was done, I went inside and called into work on my day off to arrange a bucket truck to come out and rerun the cable so you could beat the rush of calls that came in all across the island due to the storm. You didn't even have to call, a truck is already en route. And, well, that shut him up. I worked at a photo printing lab and we got people in all the time who claimed we were stupid and had messed up their pictures. One woman had us print 800 vacation pictures. They were bad quality, dark, and out of focus. When she came to pick them up, she insisted that we had ruined them and that they were perfect in her camera and that she had a very expensive camera, so there was no way the pictures could be dark or out of focus. We finally gave her money back even though we had done nothing wrong and we were out a lot of time and paper. She called us 30 minutes later and told us she was at a store across town, and they'd reprinted all of her pictures and they were beautiful, in focus, and nice and bright. I had to tell her that the same person who owned our store also owned the store across town, and that not only would it have taken the store several hours to reprint 800 pictures, but their printer was down that day, so they couldn't have printed anything. She hung up on me. This is a woman with too much time on her hands. If you believe the store messed up your photos, fine, delude yourself. But why do you have to flat out invent fairy tales to try and get the last word in? Get a life. My roommates and I decided to grab some Subway before we went out one Friday night. One of them is half Ecuadorian, and the Subway employees were both Hispanic. While I was in the process of ordering my sandwich, the two workers were speaking to each other in Spanish. When it was my friend's turn, he ordered in Spanish as well, which I thought was simply a gesture. I couldn't figure out why both employees looked like ghosts and stammered their way through the entire ordering process. When I got back in the car, my friend said that the two workers had been like, "Look at this pretty boy, pretending to be cultured. What a queer, he doesn't even know the language." At which point my friend decided to place his entire order in Spanish and thank them at the end of the transaction. A customer wanted to return a computer that was about a year old when I worked in retail. I asked him what was wrong. "It just don't work." I powered it on, got into Windows, connected to the wireless network, and went online. I opened Office and everything seems to be working properly. I show it to him and ask what's wrong. "It just don't work." I asked him what was actually wrong with the machine, let alone why would you return a computer a year later. "It just don't work. Are you saying that if a car don't start, it works fine?" At this point, I'd had enough of the guy. "No, sir. I'm saying that if there was a car and everyone could start it except one person, I wouldn't blame the car." Customer smoking in a supermarket, year 2000. Staff member asks customer to stop smoking. Customer refuses. Customer escalates to me, a customer service manager at the time. I grabbed a large fire extinguisher, CO2, walk up to the customer and said, "If you don't put the cigarette out now, I'll be forced to assume you're on fire and act accordingly." The customer dropped the cigarette, stamped it out with her foot, and left the store. I was working at a gas station in a very rich part of town. During a nice summer day, a prime example of the D-bag variety of the human species drove his super expensive Lamborghini in, and in that haughty, "I'm rich so you must do what I say" voice, demanded that it be filled with premium, which the attendant started to do, only the guy immediately snatched the nozzle from him and screamed that, "You're too stupid to do this on your own." We're in Oregon, by the way, where you can't pump your own gas. It's a state fire law. Well, being that he's a D-bag and an idiot, gas spills out from the nozzle all over his sparkly D-bag mobile. At this point, he truly flips out and storms into the store where I'm working as the cashier and de facto manager. He immediately demands to speak to the owner and that we're going to have to pay to have his car repainted, and he's not going to be paying for his gas. I try my best to calm the situation, but he's got a good rage going and doesn't want to be calmed down, damn it. While he's spewing forth, I notice that an officer from the local police department is about to come into the store to get snacks or a drink or some such. This gave me a nice idea. "Sir, I'm afraid that the gas is in your tank and you pumped it yourself, so you're going to have to pay." Cutscene of an explosion. D-bag then asks, "So what exactly do you think you can do if I just go out and get in my car and leave?" Thank you, good Lord, for timing. He says this at full bellow right as the officer walks through the door. My response? Well, personally, I can't do much, but the nice Westerlin police officer standing behind you will probably arrest you for second-degree theft. The D-bag turns around to see the officer with a very predatory smile on his face, nodding vigorously. Yeah, the guy shuts up, pays, and we never saw him again. I used to be a low-level manager in a call center. It paid the bills. Anyway, a customer had called us and been perfectly pleasant, giving us his account details, and business got underway. At the end of the call, he asked for one more thing that we couldn't do, and was informed as such. He immediately got extremely aggressive with my member of staff. At this point, her hand shot up in the air, cue me, and she handed over the headset and chair so we could view the details. I was called the B word, the C word, and various other names, and then we got down to the grand finale, the threat. I'm paraphrasing, but here's how it went. Listen, B word, I can see your company's address on your website. I'm gonna come down there and F you up. At this point, I answer. So it's a good thing you gave my colleague your name and address details first then. I'll make sure to hand them over to the police somewhere in the few hours it's going to take you to drive down here. We'll be waiting. Dial tone. And of course, many of you have also drawn the same conclusion that the narrator has, that this man, who we'll charitably call a gentleman rather than a revolting sack of crap, would almost certainly have never got as personal and threatening with his language if it was a man on the phone in the first place. What a member. Not me, but my former boss. I used to work in an old family-owned gas station and garage in a small town in butt-frick nowhere. Since it was family-owned and 90% of the business came from regulars who had either business accounts or got their family's cars fixed at the shop, and had for generations on both sides. As such, the random passers-by getting gas on their way to and from cities on either side of the town made a mostly negligible amount of business. The gas station side of the business made up maybe 2% of the business, and of that, maybe 0.5% was non-regulars. So my boss couldn't give less of a crap about some of the annoying customers who came in. One day, we got a particularly annoying soccer mum. This was during the summer a few years ago, so the gas was very high compared to the rest of the year. She was convinced that our pumps were purposely calibrated incorrectly so that less gas was pumped. Her proof was that she always got X amount in gas, and it always went to a certain percentage in her tank. Well, we'd just had them recalibrated for the year and knew it was all good. She kept complaining to me about it, and being a high schooler, I didn't give a flying frick. But I kept up appearances and was polite, and I kept telling her we'd just had them calibrated. She didn't care and kept complaining. Eventually, she asked for the manager. Well, the office was right behind the counter, and my boss was in there listening the whole time. As soon as she asked for him, he simply yelled, "F off!" And that was about it. I shrugged at her, and she left. My boss was awesome with jerks like that. I used to work in a deli restaurant, and this lady comes in and rudely orders her food. I told her that everything should come out all right and that I'll double-check for her to make sure her order would be correct. She insisted on getting lots of honey mustard on her sandwich. I typed in extra honey mustard on the ticket, and sure enough, when her order comes out, there seemed to be plenty on there. But when I deliver it, she whines at me for not having the extra honey mustard I promised, and told me to fricking get a ton more honey mustard for her. I go to the back of the store, I get an entire gallon jug of honey mustard and plop it on her table. Her friends were laughing and she was steaming mad. She complained to the manager, who thought it was hilarious and actually laughed in her face. I was eating at a Taco Bell once, and I was waiting to ask for some sauce while another customer was yelling at a kitchen employee. She had pulled apart her burrito and was complaining that there wasn't enough in it. I leaned over and said, "That looks like 89 cents worth of food to me." She stormed out. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. During high school, I worked at a Burger King. I've probably told a couple of stories about it before, but I don't think I've done this one yet. There was this one woman who would always come into drive-thru during the afternoon and ask for a Whopper Jr. with extra onions. I mean, a lot of extra onions. And no matter how many we put in, she always came into the store and complained there weren't enough. Still, this was in the middle of the afternoon, so we didn't normally care. However, one day we had 4 buses full of US Army enlistees at the store at the same time. Convoys of chartered buses would go by periodically, and they usually stopped at our store because the bus drivers knew my boss. Now, these people were always the nicest, most respectful people you could possibly imagine, which was a welcome change after dealing with jerks all day. They always ordered a ton of food, all king size, tons of double and triple whoppers, and the whole 9 yards. My boss would always have me give them the senior discount of 15% off, and they enjoyed that immensely, because it said they were getting a senior discount on their receipts. Anyways, nice as they were, they strained our store to the limit because they ordered so much food. So we were almost literally going hammer and tongs to keep up. And then, Mrs. Annoying Lady comes into drive-thru. My boss just told us to grab 2 handfuls of onions and put them on the sandwich, because she didn't need a scene when we were as far behind as we were. I could barely close the fricker because of the onions, but I managed and we gave it to her. Now remember, the store is completely full of US Army enlistees. They've probably not had fast food for weeks. I think they were going from boot camp to get their first assignments. And the line was out the door. So Nasty Lady pushes her way past all of these people, rudely shoving them out of her way, and comes up to the counter screaming that she didn't have enough onions. My boss is annoyed, so she takes the sandwich, hands it to me, and tells me to do whatever the heck I want with it. I dump the entire fricking tub of onions on this, probably about 1.5 liters of onions, and I wrap it up really, really tight and tape it shut. Note that the wrappers were somewhat elastic. My boss hands it to the lady and she opens it right on the corner to make sure we have enough, even though the package is like 6 times bigger than normal. The thing fricking exploded all over her. So awesome. All the troops were trying not to laugh. One of their officers, a quite young first lieutenant, was waiting by the counter for his food, and finally he just gave up and started laughing his butt off. The troops took this as a cue, and she had about 250 soldiers all dying laughing at her. One of the best days of my high school life. She didn't come back for a month, and she never ever complained about not having enough onions again. In short, jerk woman complains about having too few onions, and I rig her modified sandwich to explode in her face. Onion geyser for the win. She gets laughed at by more than 200 troops. The narrator is somewhat unclear on how exactly this worked, but honestly, it's always good to hear about these delusional nutbags being humbled in front of large crowds. Complaining was almost certainly just a way of getting attention, so mission accomplished, B-word. I used to work for a grocery store in high school as a cashier. One busy Saturday, an older lady came through my line with about $150 worth of groceries. Among her items was a pre-packaged piece of meat from our deli that is normally priced by weight. Her meat did not have a printed sticker on the package, and I would have needed to find a bag boy or manager to run to the deli to get it priced. Because we were super busy, I decided to wing it and set it on my scale. Looks like it's almost a pound, so let's say $2.77. Does that sound fair? I began to ring it as a miscellaneous item.
No, that doesn't sound fair, she yelled. You need to get that priced.
Groans from the line began behind her as I found a bag boy to run to get the price sticker. A manager came by to see what the commotion was about, and the lady explained the situation. I explained why I'd made the decision I made, and the manager of course stuck up for the old lady, which we laughed about later, and she accepted the apology. We then waited for what seemed like an eternity of eye contact avoidance and thumb twiddling. The bag boy came back and handed me the pork. I smirked and showed her the price. $2.78. I would have saved you a penny. The man behind her chortled. Never saw her again. I stopped to get gas today, and while talking with the cashier, I mentioned that she was probably tired of people yelling at her about the price of gas, but that since she's the one standing there, she probably gets it a lot. She said that every day someone complains to her like she can do something about it. A guy then came in and demanded, "Why the hell is gas $3.76 a gallon?" Without missing a beat, she said, "Because it went down 10 cents this morning." He just looked at her, paid, and left. I worked in electronics at Target. Over at guest service, I saw a woman with her teenage daughter heatedly speaking to the guy at the counter. After a few minutes, he pointed over at me in electronics. The woman's head whirled around, dragon-like, toward me. The rest of her body realigned with her head, and she stomped in my direction. When she reached the counter, I pleasantly asked, "How can I help you?" She slammed a receipt and a PS3 controller on the counter. "I paid $55 for this, and I can only return it for $40. I asked, "Can I see your receipt?" She nodded and I picked it up.
"See? $55.
"Yeah, I see that," I said. "You bought this last week when the store gave away a $15 gift certificate with the controller."
"So what?"
"You'd shop at Target again, right?" I asked.
"Not if this isn't resolved,"
she spat. Her daughter next to her was embarrassed. "Hypothetically, if there wasn't an issue, I'm guessing you would, and you would use the $15 gift card on your future purchase. If we let you return this controller for $55, then you would have a free $15. That is why the return price is $15 less. I can do the return for you over here if you don't want to go back to guest service."
"I didn't want to return it, I just wanted to know why the return price was so much less,"
she said. She picked up her controller and receipt and began to walk off. Her daughter, clearly ashamed of her mother, thanked me and followed her mother out. I used to work in Best Buy services. It was sort of like Geek Squad before Geek Squad, and it dealt with everything like TVs and VCRs and junk. One day we had a guy come in and complain about his little video camera not working. I agree to take a look at it even though there's not much I can do but send it back to the manufacturer for him. It'll take some time, but that was 90% of the problem people had with services. Naturally, this guy wants a new one on the spot and he starts getting really loud about it. So I call the manager because I can't even take a leak in Best Buy without getting manager approval, and while I'm waiting for the manager to come up, I'm still tinkering with the camera in the back. I get some tools out and, hey, look, I got the thing open for the guy. A minute or so later, I come back out when the manager gets there. The manager is talking to the guy as I move a computer up to the counter. I jump in and say, "Hey, I don't think we should give this guy a new unit." The guy gives me dagger eyes and the manager is like, "Oh, why's that?" I then play the footage of what is unmistakably someone running around a pool, dropping the camera which tumbles into said pool. He'd taken out the tape, but it was recorded to the memory stick. The guy takes his camera and quietly leaves the store. It was worth 2 years of an otherwise pretty annoying job. Busted. I'm just sad that he likely took this immediately to another store, sans the memory stick. But at least he wasted his time for a bit longer. Used to work in a pawn shop. We got lots of jewelry in, and a lot of times the person bringing the jewelry would have no idea that some of their stuff was fake. 9 times out of 10, they'd get annoyed and leave their stuff with us to be thrown out. My coworker accidentally left a really gaudy but fake gold chain out on the desk one day. A customer came in, noticed the chain, and told us we'd better put it away before someone stole it. I was about to, but then I realized I could have some fun. We ended up leaving the chain on the desk and would casually watch people as they came in to do business. We caught a number of people trying to steal the chain. One guy in particular was talking us up and gradually pulling the chain off the counter. When he'd successfully pocketed it and left the store, my coworker and I began to crack up. Sure enough, about a week later the guy came back in with the chain that he stole and tried to sell it to us. When I refused to buy it, he got annoyed, but then we showed him the security cam footage of him stealing it. We weren't even angry. Someone that dumb deserves to live his life that way until he walks in front of a bus or into a wood chipper. I work in a shoe shop. One of the services we supply is to check how well school shoes fit on our younger customers. Once a staff member has signed to say they're a good fit, the customer is able to bring them back if there are any problems. This one time, a mother came back in with her son a week after being fitted with a pair, loudly mouthing off that the shoes were too tight and causing blisters. Even though she was being a psycho hose beast about it, we offered to get her a new pair. Once back in the kids department, she spotted the girl who'd fitted the original shoes and she went pants on head insane at her, demanding that the girl should be there whilst a better pair was fitted so she wouldn't make the same mistake again. Despite the mum saying some pretty degrading stuff about her, the girl agreed to sit in on the refit in an attempt to help out. She remembered the customer, even to the point of remembering the kid's name, and was visibly upset about doing a bad job. Returning to the counter, the fitter offered to put the exchange through as a final gesture of goodwill, and then froze with an awesome crap-eating grin on her face. "These aren't your son's shoes," she said to the customer. "They have a tag inside saying Tommy and your son's name is Billy." It turns out the kid had swapped his shoes with another boy in his class. We laughed that woman out of the shop. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.